The story begins with a girl surrounded by an enraged crowd. They shout, "Burn the witch and cleanse the empire." There's nothing she can do since she's chained. Many, furious, even demand that they tear out her evil, cursed tongue to feed it to the dogs. Meanwhile, the girl asks the Heavenly Mother if this is the price she must pay. The man is ready to recount the crimes of the accused that condemned her to the stake. She is there for her blasphemous disdain toward the empire by disguising herself as a saint, as well as the crime of attempting to eliminate the empress, blinded by her own jealousy. But for someone who supposedly suffered such an attempt, the empress doesn't seem very shocked by it, besides her wicked smile as she listens to the furious citizens demanding that they burn the girl. Even with all of this, the blonde looks up to the sky, speaking once more to the Heavenly Mother. She says that if she had a single sin, it would be the feeling of helplessness when accepting a false role that was forced upon her. Her regret is having had no path to become a true saint. The crown of thorns rests on her head, and the fire around her is about to devour her as the people scream in fury, awaiting her fate. Then the girl accepts it, the punishment for being false. However, she wants to know what retribution the mother plans to give the transgressors who forced her to pretend everything. If such an entity truly exists, the girl asks her to guide them to annihilation with her own hands, and to forbid her from loving anyone ever again. Alicia is enveloped by the Heavenly Mother's hand. She came because she heard her dear child plead and pray. The mother says that her only sin lies in her unwavering faith in love, and thus grants her the opportunity to change her life. Alicia screams as she is engulfed by the flames. From the sky, she sees a woman with black hair. As her life comes to an end, the girl remembers the moments she experienced, like when she got married, and when her faith was proclaimed. This time, Alicia receives the promise that in her new life she will receive abundant love. Thus, Lady Alicia wakes from this dream, screaming desperately. Her maid is beside her, worried, asking what she feels. The blonde can only say that she was burning. Through tears, Izzy says she was having a horrible nightmare, and that the girl left her worried for days, showing no sign of waking up. Somewhere else, someone gives thanks to the Monsignor, who doesn't seem very enthusiastic. The silver-haired man is receiving thanks for bringing dear Lady Alicia back to health. But before reaching this point, Alicia was very loved by everyone, and it was always a joy when the saint appeared to greet them. People shout that she looks radiant as always and ask her to show her beautiful face. When the morning sunlight blessed them with its light, she gently waved her hand to the people of the empire, who had waited since dawn just to be seen, thus asking for blessings for an abundant harvest this autumn. Others for their families to have peace and happiness. A perfect scene with not a single flaw in sight. But none of them knew one thing. It was all nothing more than an act. Alicia was the perfect puppet chosen to behave according to the script. About a year ago, a prophecy was delivered to the Empire. It said, "The one who radiates golden light and possesses cerulean gems. Their light shall guide the Emperor's path." These prophecies were spoken in the ancient tongue, which could end up having different meanings depending on who interprets them and how they are read. Therefore, the practice was to gather scholars and theologians to interpret the words. However, 1 year ago, the Central Pantheon presented a sudden and different interpretation, saying that a blonde woman with blue eyes would become the saint of the empire. Thus, with this declaration, the Pantheon searched the empire for women with these characteristics. All of them were taken and went through a divine evaluation, and Alicia was one of the evaluated. Upon arriving, she stated her name, one that no one speaks anymore, being the precious and only daughter of the Duchy and the House of Cercelian. And it just so happened that a beautiful noble lady raised in the empire was the saint mentioned in the prophecy. The lady also had golden hair as if woven by rays of sunlight, and sapphire eyes that resembled the blue sky. After Alicia assumed the role of saint, no one would question that her pure beauty represented the Heavenly Mother. After all, could there be a more perfect saint than her? But what no one knew was that it was all just a facade, a mask created by the Pantheon. When she was alone, the truth came out. The maid comes to inform her that her meal is ready, setting down the plate prepared for the saint. Without much excitement, Alicia asks if this too was planned by His Excellency. The maid confirms, saying that the man begged the girl to eat as little as possible, and seeing what was on the plate, it's understandable why she isn't very pleased. This is the very man who made her a saint, and who controls what she eats, when she should sleep, when she blinks, and even each breath she takes. Everything was being observed and controlled in great detail. Even her marriage to the crown prince was imposed without her consent, proving that besides being false, her life was truly nothing more than following the script. However, even though it was an arranged marriage, in the end it was her only hope, because she had someone by her side who helped her cope with this place. Looking at the unappealing plate, she thinks she doesn't know when she'll get another chance to eat that day if she decides to skip this meal. Someone enters, calling for the saint. It's His Excellency, who says he is there to escort her to resolve an urgent matter. The girl immediately stands and greets him. He notices the plate on the table and simply says, "You are in the middle of your meal. It seems you've already eaten enough. Why don't we get up? But he knows very well she had just touched the fork. Alicia even tries to protest, saying she hasn't even started. The girl barely had anything on the plate and is still being stopped. But with a stern look, His Excellency attempts his manipulation by questioning how a saint could be so attached to something as simple as food. The man continues, claiming that he has begged many times, saying that such attachments are not very worthy of sainthood, then asks if she needs more instructions. Then, at that moment, he grabs her forcefully. His Excellency asks why she is making that expression, since she must always be smiling regardless of the situation, making it clear that he ordered her, as a saint, to radiate the most beautiful smile in the world. Terrified both by his words and by being hurt, holding back tears, Alicia forces a smile, which pleases this cruel man. He finally releases the false saint and says that His Majesty seeks knowledge with urgency, and that he is certainly afraid, counting the days he has left. The man says he considers it a great honor and privilege to guide his soul, as a loyal servant of the Heavenly Mother serving Alicia the Saint. He pulls the girl along to hurry, and in a calmer voice says that it is a request he makes. But it doesn't last long, as he soon makes his order clear. She must remain silent, as an incarnation of the goddess should. The entrance of the Empire's saint is announced. Everyone is lined up, forming a human corridor that leads them toward His Majesty. Acting her role, the saint says she received his request for knowledge. With a terrible appearance and trembling heavily, he begs her to answer one of his questions. His Majesty wants forgiveness for the acts he committed 25 years ago. This is where Alicia's acting begins to falter. After all, the girl doesn't know what he committed in the past, as she is a mere human who possesses no divine powers. So how could she answer that? Unaware of the saint's inner conflict, His Majesty becomes desperate, thinking he cannot be forgiven. Alicia stammers as she tries to explain that this is not what she meant. But a man near the end of his life is obviously not thinking clearly, even more so when he has a dark past. He grabs the saint's hand while crying heavily, begging that it can't be like this, which is obviously affecting Alicia. His Majesty wants to be blessed so he can have peace of mind. At this moment, he begins to cough, worrying his guards. Even so, the man continues with his request, and all Alicia can do is ask him to calm down. Desperate, he begs for forgiveness. This is too much for her, and she ends up pulling her arm away, asking him to stop. The girl closes her eyes in fear, then opens them to understand what happened, realizing the old man has fallen to the ground. Chaos begins, with the men calling for the doctor. Terrified, Alicia can only repeat that she didn't do anything. At that moment, the prince arrives, wanting to know what all the commotion is about and saying he also heard that His Majesty is in critical condition. The guards look at him with frightened expressions and deliver the news that His Majesty has passed on to the other world. The prince's gaze turns to the saint. Alicia tries to say something but stutters, but all Victor demands is that she explain everything that happened there, leaving the girl even more terrified. Still shocked by the recent news, the redhead wants to know what happened there. Desperate, Alicia says she will explain, but His Excellency is quick, taking control of everything as he greets the prince as his loyal servant. He lies, saying that His Majesty was granted peace by the saint present there. His Excellency states this with complete conviction. Barely giving the body time to cool, he already says it is time for them to discuss the succession to the throne. But a man bursts in, shouting to stop him. He says that the situation at hand has not even been handled properly, and questions how he dares to call himself a divine servant when he does not even consider the position of the two princes. After all, what leads him to make such rushed decisions? Not to mention that they have not yet identified His Majesty's final wishes. But the man counters these criticisms, saying that the Chancellor of the Great Empire having such a limited point of view is exactly why he chose to handle this matter quickly. Before the argument becomes heated, yet another person joins the conversation and brings with him a letter written by His Majesty's own hand. It is the will which quickly wipes the greedy old man's smile, and maybe a small relief for the saint. He doesn't miss the chance to provoke the Chancellor about the Emperor's wishes, saying His Majesty had the wisdom to foresee a circumstance like this and calm the confusion by preparing a will. Besides that, he uses the saint's presence there. After all, she is supposedly a living representative of the Heavenly Mother. So he asks if she can verify the will's validity, once again leaving the girl uneasy. The man wants her to read the contents of the will aloud. Alicia is very frightened, still not having recovered from what she just witnessed, but she has no way to refuse. So she takes it and begins to read. From this day forward, intending to mark the end of my long journey and thus enter my eternal sleep, I have faith that my son and official heir, Victor, is the successor to the throne. I also have no doubt that the sanctity of the empire will complement anything my son may lack as the next emperor. Alicia finishes the letter, deciding the outcome of everything. This is a drastic change for the prince's life, and to me, he doesn't seem confident. His Excellency kneels before the new emperor, already placing himself as a loyal servant. The conclusion does not please either the chancellor or the other prince. But nothing can be done, since according to the last words of the former ruler, Victor is the successor to the throne, and thus time flew by, and Alicia and her husband grew accustomed to their new positions. The two are in a meeting, finalizing the morning schedule for his new majesty. But one of the advisors asks if the young man has heard about the problem in the south, since worsening famine led to a large reduction in this year's harvest. And that would be the next matter. Alicia quickly notices her husband's intention upon hearing that, so she calls him. With the best intentions, the saint asks if, in case there are no other matters, they could have dinner together. But the emperor reacts badly, saying it's all such a bother. This leaves the girl shaken, even with him asking to drop the subject. Victor stands up, turning his back to his wife, saying he will have to decline because of a commitment. Immediately, Alicia rises, trying to reach him, and asks if she did something wrong. Because to her, there is no other reason for the emperor to behave so differently, especially since he has been this way ever since his father passed away. The false saint wonders if her husband became disappointed after discovering her lack of divine power. Trembling, she promises she can do better. While she blames herself for what happened, thinking that if she weren't a fraud, the late emperor might still be alive, Victor simply asks if that is all she has to say. Since she doesn't say anything else, the redhead says it's a waste of time. Revealing his true face, the young man says he expects nothing in particular from her, and that perhaps something like that existed only in the past. He says he has been attentive enough to her and will make sure the servants bring good rations, then takes his leave, leaving Alicia disappointed behind, unable to believe what happened, because it is nothing like the person she knew. Moving to memories of the wedding, in the past, the blonde, worried, asked if he fully agreed with this, and he playfully pretended not to understand her concern. The saint feels this way because everything happened so suddenly, and everyone is saying the same thing, that the marriage only exists because of the prophecy, which the very attentive young man completely denies. Very gently, Victor holds her hand and says she is the only person he wants in his life. Kneeling, he promises that he will live only for her for all eternity. Then he kisses her hand after calling her a beautiful saint. Victor has a loving gaze that would certainly fool many people. Alicia, never having suspected anything, simply accepts this love. Now, in the middle of the night, she is lying alone in her bed, realizing that everything was useless, and she cannot be blamed for never suspecting anything when she was already being manipulated by that old man. Looking toward the window, she notices even the sky is gloomy, ready to rain. Suddenly, something catches her attention. Alicia goes to the balcony, seeing that black mass. Realizing there is something wrong with the sky, she wants to understand that dark smoke in the air. Apparently, no one else besides the girl is noticing it. Alicia notices something else. Victor is also there, which makes her curious about what he is doing. She opens the door in a rush, accidentally hitting one of the maids who coincidentally was about to enter. The woman asks where she is going, but Alicia ignores her, running in a hurry even without knowing what is happening, worried that her husband might be in danger. Other people soon begin to notice the sky changing. However, what they say is that the sky is shining with a radiant light. This leaves the saint truly surprised, because to others, this black smoke appears as light. Finally, she sees her husband there. The saint is about to go to him when someone notices something else in the sky. A person is falling. Alicia looks at the scene, shocked. Victor reaches out his arm to catch the fall. The girl falls directly into the emperor's arms. As soon as she opens her eyes, Victor asks if she's all right. It doesn't take long for people to start murmuring that she is a real saint. After all, the fact that she simply descended from the sky floating proves she is genuine, except the empire already has one, thus raising questions about Alicia. So what should she be? Some time passes after this event, and the maids comment that the witch from the Empress's palace is still in one of the rooms, which they find absurd, that she has access to that after deceiving everyone into believing she was a saint. Not to mention that Alicia is now being blamed because the harvest worsened, and on top of that, a flood happened. Alicia is hiding, listening to the maids comment that she is busy seducing His Majesty every night under the Empress's nose, and they wonder why she hasn't been expelled to put an end to this. But apparently, they believe the new couple has such kind hearts that they pity her. After Sua descended from the sky, both the position of saint and of empress were transferred to her without any issue, and she gained the title of witch. Alicia is in the garden, and her name is called, snapping her out of her trance. Sua is sitting and asks how many times she needs to call her. The empress asks if she will really keep irritating her like that. She finds everything so boring, as she was hoping for a bit more excitement in the palace. For Sua, all this talk about empress and saint and such a useless purpose deeply irritates her. Meanwhile, Alicia has a sad look in her eyes, which does not go unnoticed by the empress. She stands up, intimidating, and asks if she is showing that she is annoyed, and the blonde says she could never do such a thing. Besides calling her by an offensive name, Sua says she should know her place and throws it in her face, asking if she forgot who allowed her to stay there with her neck intact. On that day, His Excellency said that the Central Pantheon would take full responsibility for the great offense of misinterpreting the prophecy, and that they would track down everyone involved to punish them severely. But Victor doesn't care about this, preferring to deal with it later because he wants to discuss the true sanctity. The old man says that after the Pantheon's confirmation, the true saint is right in front of him, and I would never trust them either. But after she fell from the sky, there is no way to contest it. His Excellency advises that Alicia Sorcelian be excommunicated from her role as saint, also considering it appropriate that she abdicate the throne of Empress. Victor asks the girl what she thinks of the decision. Alicia is deeply affected by this situation, and without anyone to protect her, she obviously agrees to follow the Pantheon's will. But this does not satisfy the Chancellor, because to him, such actions still do not absolve the false saint of her deceptions against the palace and the empire. Another old man agrees, since the blonde, knowing of the deception, accepted the position, and therefore he believes she should be properly punished. In the middle of this discussion, the true saint raises her hand, asking for permission to speak. Victor grants the task to the dark-haired girl, taking the opportunity to give a charming smile. With an angelic look, Sua says she has a suggestion regarding the matter and asks if the blonde can grant her request. Back again, the Empress tells her not to forget the day she saved her neck. Intimidating, she asks who stopped Victor from throwing her straight into the dungeons, and obviously the blonde makes it clear that it was the saint's mercy. Irritated, Sua grabs her forcefully, saying she was forced to replace her as saint and empress, and then created the new role of assistant to the saintliness, saving the blonde's skin, making it very clear that everything was thanks to her. Sua slaps Alicia across the face, still irritated by the way the girl looked at her. With the impact, the blonde falls to the ground. Even as the victim, she apologizes while the Empress continues mistreating her, wanting to appear as the only wronged one, and says the request was not enough. Alicia was about to say something, but she is kicked by the Empress. Sua grabs the butterfly brooch and asks that if she is truly remorseful for her actions, she won't mind staying without the object. But the blonde cannot allow that and begs her not to take it, which is good for the saint, who says she saw contempt on her face earlier, but now she sees something else appear. Alicia kneels before her, pleading because it is a gift from her father, and she hasn't had the opportunity to visit the estate for a long time, having not seen him in months. Sua examines the brooch more closely. It is the only thing the blonde has from her family. That is why the so-called witch is willing to do anything she asks, even undergo a punishment, and she will not seek His Majesty's advice nor ask to be sent home. But the cruel Empress simply breaks her beloved brooch, shattering into pieces the only good thing the girl had left. Desperate, she tries to gather what remains of her father's memory. Taking advantage of this for amusement, Sua wants to share something funny. Then she reveals that the girl's father is imprisoned for the crime of sacrilege, saying that is the reason the man has not come to see his daughter. Alicia becomes even more desperate with this news, while the Empress says he is a swindler who tried to make the blonde pass as a saint. Even so, Alicia defends her dear father's honor, who opposed her being sanctified until the very end. But for Sua, it doesn't matter that the man was against it, because the most important thing is that everything was planned by her since the beginning. Smiling, she says that spreading a few rumors about her witchcraft causing the famine helped. Completely broken, Alicia wants an explanation. She screams that she lived exactly as they told her to and asks why the Empress is doing this. Sua makes it clear that it doesn't take much, or anything valid, for people to be cruel to others. And so Alicia realizes something. This is not a true saint, but rather a truly cunning, evil witch. This discovery will come with a price. With malicious intent, the wicked witch snaps her fingers. Then a swarm of crows suddenly appears. They fly toward them, and Alicia wants to know what the woman is plotting. Something that is certainly not good. Sua begins screaming for help. Immediately, one of the guards appears. He sees the swarm of crows attacking the Empress. Sua says this is because the witch is using her magic to finish her off. The birds make one last attack, leaving the Empress badly injured, who then collapses to the ground, thus causing a new commotion. The guard picks up the Empress and complains about why the others are just standing there. Then he orders them to seize the witch. In the dungeon, people whisper that Alicia thought she would get away with this even with all those witnesses, which they consider audacity after harming Her Majesty. As if being called a witch were not enough, the girl was also accused of attempting to eliminate the Empress and thus condemned to the penalty of life's end. She wonders whether her beloved Victor would think she would never attempt such an act, and I think the protagonist truly is a saint for still believing this man is kind. Alicia thinks the Emperor is such a gentle and wise man. In any case, she asks herself whether this time he will truly grow tired of her. If only the redhead could hear what she has to say. So she only wishes he would grant her mercy. As if he predicted her desire, Victor arrives shortly after, but there is something different about him, and this does not go unnoticed by Alicia. The Emperor clenches his fists, irritated, and with great anger, he strikes the girl as punishment for what she did. Victor asks if she knows what he had to do to become an emperor, but now, because of her, things are at risk. Alicia begs him to let her go, no longer recognizing the man before her because he is not the one she knows. The man ignores her plea and even laughs, saying he should have known she was more ambitious than she appeared. He continues being cruel, pulling her beautiful blonde hair. Victor asks if she thought she could replace the Empress if she managed to eliminate her the same way she did with the former emperor, implying she plotted against his own father. Finally, the redhead releases her, and the girl pleads that she could never do such a thing. Victor pushes her and questions why she harmed Sua. Even wounded and mistreated, Alicia begs, saying she never wanted to do anything and asking that if he ever loved her, he believes she is not a witch. But what can the redhead say about love for her? He asks if she really just threw that word at his face. Victor grabs a fire poker and heats it in the flames while saying he will teach her a lesson, just for the sake of old memories, making it clear that he never, absolutely never, loved her even for a moment. He says the girl was only a tool in his grand plan to inherit the throne, and now that she is not even a saint, she has no use. Realizing his intent, Alicia begs him to stop. The man kicks her and says that if she had stayed quiet like the idiot she is, at least he could have had some fun with her whenever he needed. But unfortunately for her, Victor then brands the poor Alicia on the back, causing her to scream in pain. After all this cruelty, he says that an ugly and ruined mark suits her. The Emperor orders them to remove her fingernails and do whatever it takes to obtain a confession, as well as bring the girl's father if necessary. But Victor thinks about it more and realizes that a confession is not enough, demanding that the witch suffer greatly, which leaves the guard somewhat confused. Then he makes it clear that the ignorant peasants are in revolt, and nothing would calm them more than seeing the witch responsible for all their suffering endure the maximum amount of pain. And thus, Alicia's fate is sealed. The crowd is united for one purpose: to see the witch burn. It was as easy as turning a hand. The guard reads Alicia's sentence, which says that the accused soul shall be claimed by the flames and her spirit become miserable for eternity, unable to reincarnate forever. He asks if the girl has any final words. Alicia thinks about it. She begins by saying that if she truly is innocent, and since the man claims her spirit will be lost in this world, Alicia swears right there that the demonic transgressors who forced her to stay there, who defiled and insulted her father and herself, that she will never forgive what was done, ensuring that their souls rot and decay, that they end up twisting and thrashing in eternal agony. Victor mocks her words, asking if they really need to keep listening, because he wouldn't expect anything different from a witch. Then he orders them to cut out that evil, cursed tongue and throw it to the dogs, and so they obey. Alicia thinks that if only she had one more chance to undo all of this. She wants the permission to lead them to annihilation with her own hands. With the torch in hand, the guard declares that God have mercy on her soul. The witch wishes to lead them to destruction. Alicia awakens from her sleep. Izzy is at her side, worried and wanting to know if she feels well, and the blonde, confused, says she was burning. The woman says it must have been just a fever delirium and that the girl fainted for days, leaving her very worried. Lady Alicia starts coughing, making the older woman desperate to know if she is all right. In her hand, the girl notices she has salty water expelled from the cough. This worries her, and she asks Izzy what it means. Izzy says the strong fever was not improving, and they thought they had lost her. Confused, Alicia thinks about the fever she doesn't even remember. At that moment, a man appears, saying the girl is still a bit warm and suggesting she stay in bed a little longer to rest. The girl looks at him, wanting to know who he is, noticing she has never heard someone with that kind of voice. The silver-haired man asks if it is possible that she could return. Izzy is the one who answers, in tears, thanking His Eminence for everything he did and asking how she could repay such a debt. Meanwhile, Alicia notices the woman is practically pushing him against the wall. As calmly as possible, the man explains once again that he is not a doctor, but merely a cleric, and what he performed was not a ritual of healing, but a simple intercession. In any case, she still has a fever, so he asks her to make sure to choose a doctor to care for the girl. Still dazed from waking up, Alicia worries about the fact that she cannot remember anything that happened, and that is all she wants to know. Far from the girl, they talk. The silver-haired man wishes for the lady to recover her health and says his services are no longer needed. Izzy thanks him for everything His Eminence did and wishes for him to return safely. Alicia calls for her maid. Immediately, Izzy goes to her, asking if she wants food, suggesting a tomato soup that is quick and easy to digest, or if she prefers to take a bath. But it is none of that. The girl is simply confused, not knowing what happened there. She asks what the older woman meant when she said they thought they had lost her. She cannot remember what happened, explaining that it feels almost like waking up from a long dream but being unable to remember exactly what it was about. Izzy suggests it must have been because of the fever, revealing that she kept drifting in and out of consciousness for a long time because of it. Alicia considers that this might be true, because honestly, she cannot remember anything, everything feeling foggy, but the maid tries to comfort her about that, saying not to worry because if she can't remember, it surely wasn't worth remembering. And we know well that those memories would be nothing but painful for the girl. In the end, the lady accepts what the woman says, thanking her for the advice. Izzy says there is no problem, since her only priority is to make sure she gets better, and informs her she prepared a tomato beef stew just for her girl. Alicia perks up at that, saying she is starving, and it sounds amazing. But this enthusiasm surprises the maid, since the blonde never liked beef much. The blonde doesn't really remember that, so Izzy reminds her she always worried her because she preferred to nibble on salads. Alicia says that perhaps after getting sick, her tastes changed a lot, though she doesn't sound very confident. Either way, this makes the woman happy, and she asks her to wait while she gets a bowl. Deep down, thinking of salads made Alicia nauseous. And well, we know why. As she is placed back in bed, she asks how long she was out, since the last thing she remembers is the autumn leaves in all their colors. Izzy believes she must be confused, since despite the cold, it is still summer, which is understandable given her state. She was unconscious for a week. She explains more about how difficult that period was, with the medicine from the medical team not working and Alicia vomiting all the soup they tried to give her. Alicia thinks that if she really was out for that long, everything would indeed feel strange, not to mention she often gets sick around this time of year. But of all that happened, the one thing she cannot get out of her head is the face of that cleric. He looked exhausted, probably from staying by her side for a long time. Izzy calls her, asking if she heard what she said. The woman asks her to pay attention, and Lady Allie only comments that she didn't manage to properly thank the Monsignor. The older woman explains that His Eminence is a priest in a monastery where he stayed for a brief time. She reveals that the silver-haired man stayed by the girl's side during the night, praying for her recovery. Everyone is grateful for that. Knowing this moves the girl deeply, especially because she was unable to repay him. So she asks that the monastery be checked so she can send a donation, something that excites the older woman, since the place is always in need of help. Suddenly, the bedroom doors are opened in a rush. It is her father, Duke Theodore Sorcelian. The man is relieved that his daughter woke up and bombards her with questions, wanting to know if she feels well, if she regained strength, and even how her legs and arms are. Smiling gracefully, the girl says she is fine. Izzy reprimands him, saying the blonde still needs to rest, and he apologizes, saying he simply got excited upon seeing his little girl awake, grateful for it. Alicia assures him she feels much better. Theodore lets out a relieved sigh, thanking the heavens. He touches her hand tenderly, revealing his fear that he could have lost her too. If that had happened, he doesn't know if he would have endured it. Allie understands that he became even more worried after her mother passed away. Theodore searches his pocket, remembering the gift he kept with him while waiting for her to wake up. He takes out a beautiful butterfly brooch, recalling when his daughter mentioned she thought it was pretty, so he found that one in the market. He adjusts the brooch on her clothes, promising to find a lovely dress that matches it once she gets better. The Duke also suggests buying warm clothes before the cold weather arrives, since his daughter takes after Helena and needs to take care of her fragile health. But Allie is not paying attention. She is frozen by a familiar sensation the brooch caused. Even though she has never seen it before, its touch and shape feel vivid, as if she had received that gift long ago. Seeing his daughter acting strangely, Theodore asks if she's all right. A memory invades Alicia's mind. When Sua broke it while revealing everything had been planned all along, the girl begins to scream, worrying everyone. Deeply shaken, Alicia wonders how she could have forgotten all of this after everything they did to her. The lady sobs as she cries, and Izzy approaches, worried, asking if she is all right. But the girl weeps in agony for everything those transgressors did to her life. Some time passes, and it is very late. The Duke tries to relax, but as soon as he notices Isadora's presence, he asks about his daughter. Worried, the woman says she isn't getting much better and that the girl didn't eat anything all day, staying confined to bed. Theodore intends to find out what caused her to panic so suddenly. It would have been easier if at least Allie had said something. So the two of them sigh. Suddenly, they are surprised by Alicia's voice asking permission to enter his office. The blonde appears looking much better than earlier. Immediately, the Duke goes to her, saying she could have called him if she needed anything instead of coming, since she still isn't fully healthy. She smiles, assuring him that everything will be fine. But the reason she is there is that there is something she wants to discuss with both of them. Alicia's expression changes completely. Very nervous, she doesn't even know where to begin. But first, she needs to show them something. Alicia closes the window curtain so that no one besides them will see. Izzy and the Duke look at each other, confused. The blonde asks them not to be alarmed by what she is about to show. She begins removing part of her clothing, leaving the two absolutely stunned by what is on her back. Her father especially is deeply shocked by it, wanting to know the meaning of that scar. Theodore asks her to explain it, so it is time to tell them that she once died and returned to the past. After hearing all of this, Izzy is shocked that they did something so horrible to the lady. The woman even starts crying, imagining what those demonic creatures did. Isadora embraces the girl, declaring that those horrible people must receive an unfathomable punishment. And I am impressed with this story, since in many others, the heroines simply accept all the suffering inflicted on them, but here she actually has support for revenge. The maid keeps lamenting what happened. After all, how could someone have the courage to do such a thing to the girl? Meanwhile, Theodore is outraged that the crown prince and prelate Labentius did this to his Alicia. The girl reveals that soon the central pantheon will share a prophecy about a saint, and that it is certainly very likely that the chosen saint this time will be her once again. The girls are outside enjoying the morning breeze, and Alicia wants to ask Izzy a question. If things ever got so out of control that the woman had to run away, where would she go? All the older woman wants to know is what goes on in Alicia's head all day, but her answer is that she would probably flee to a monastery. This makes Alicia curious about the reason for that decision. So Izzy explains that there is nothing more isolated in the world than a distant monastery. Not to mention that divine servants also don't need to pay taxes or be drafted. Alicia says with so much excitement that the woman is absolutely right that she even startles her. Ideas begin forming in the girl's head, and she asks the woman if she would love for her not to become a saint. Obviously, Isadora doesn't agree with that. Angry, she even wants to storm into the throne room and make those people regret ever laying a hand on her. Besides, her father is very worried about this issue and is trying to find a way to stop the prophecy. Alicia says there may be a way. She still doesn't know the exact answer, but she thinks she knows where to start looking. So she asks the woman to help her request just one favor from the Duke. In the room, Alicia is surrounded by several books on divinity that her father managed to find in the market. The man asks what she is trying to do with them, and she says she is filtering content that focuses on religious precepts and sainthood. The girl has learned that there was another prophecy a long time ago predicting the birth of a saint, but even then there were women who were not considered for that role. That's why she checks the books to make sure one of them explains the reason. Thinking from that angle, it's a great idea to find out why those women were not valid candidates, so she can save her own skin. Worried, Theodore says she doesn't need to overburden herself like that. The man says he will do everything he can to ensure this prophecy does not fall upon her, but the blonde already knows that, because she has already seen him do exactly that in the future. So she reveals that her father did everything he could to prevent her from becoming a saint. He even donated to the Pantheon and went to His Majesty to plead the case. But the girl had no choice but to go through with it anyway because Labentius wanted it. Alicia says that unless they remove her face right this moment and make her completely unrecognizable, she will remain the holy woman that man desires. The girl warns that they have less than half a year before the prophecy is announced, because any living woman at that time with golden hair and blue eyes, regardless of class, background, or physical location, will be forced to be admitted for the divine evaluation. So Alicia begs him to allow her to do everything she can to protect everyone. Even though it's not what he wishes, Theodore accepts that she must do what needs to be done, but the man feels miserable for not being able to protect his only daughter. He asks that at least, in exchange, the girl remember to eat her meals, since Isadora is very worried about her, and so the two of them strike a deal. Thus, the man leaves her there handling things. Upon meeting Izzy, the maid says that it is in moments like these that she most remembers Duchess Helena, with all the determination the girl has. And he agrees. Losing Helena so young made a bright and energetic girl mature overnight. His poor daughter never had the chance to express herself the way only a child can. To him, Alicia should not be allowed to do any of this. If it were up to him, things would never be this way. He wonders how he can protect her. Theodore decides things cannot remain like this. The Duke discusses that His Royal Highness Andrea should become the next emperor, but wants to know what will happen if Prince Victor is chosen. The man says the current emperor's health does not seem to be improving, predicting the prelate will take action. He says they should remain silent and simply observe for now, because they cannot risk stepping out of line and getting caught in unnecessary crossfire. But Theodore wonders whether that is truly the best course of action. After all, what if something bad happens to Allie in the meantime? The man thinks that if he stands up now and opposes Victor in an attempt to protect his daughter, that will certainly guarantee they face even more problems. Even if he sends her far away, Victor would do anything to find her. And as long as the crown and the church continue to hold equal power, they will be far too weak to confront them. Not to mention that they need more information about the saint who will descend from the sky. Theodore looks at the painting on the wall and sighs. It is of his beloved wife, and his plea is that she gives strength to him and Alicia, that from where she is, she helps protect their daughter. Meanwhile, the blonde continues in the library. Allie is determined in her research. Spending so much time there, exhaustion and fatigue were bound to catch up with her. She flips through the book. When she finally finds something that is truly worth it, according to the sacred scriptures, a nun or vestal in the service of the goddess cannot be considered the answer to a prophecy, so she simply needs to become one. Alicia thinks about how cruel destiny can be sometimes, and in her case, it was terrible suffering. To avoid becoming a saint again, she must voluntarily submit to the church's service. Some time passes, and Alicia already has her things packed and ready to leave. Izzy and Theodore suffer because of it, but there is not much the girl can do, so she asks them to keep all of this a secret. She also asks them to hide it from the staff and advises them to pretend she disappeared in the middle of the night without saying a word. Isadora cries at her departure and laments that it happened so suddenly, giving her no chance to do anything, only to stay behind, say goodbye, and for the lady, that is enough. Thus ended the mornings in which she was gently awakened by Izzy's warm touch. And she will no longer be able to get up and walk down the hall just because she wants to see her father. She must say goodbye to the Sorcellian estate, where she was born and raised. Alicia is seeking a life of service to the goddess without a shred of true piety. Because of that, she may be punished. Or perhaps she already is. Even so, she will give up everything she has there and survive. And that is fine, if the goddess gave her another chance. Thus, Alicia intends to survive with all her strength and protect this precious place. The protagonist followed her new destiny. However, a difficulty arose along the way. Even being sure there is a monastery somewhere around, she cannot find it. And to make matters worse, heavy rain starts to fall. Because of that, the path becomes twisted and dangerous. The girl ends up slipping and falling full force onto the ground. It is too much suffering for her, and at this point, she is already extremely exhausted. Sitting there, she reflects that even though she managed to start over, everything still feels the same. In the end, she ran away only to end up collapsed in the same pile of mud again. When she is about to give up on everything, a light appears in her path. A person says she came out to see where all that noise was coming from. It is a vestal, who smiles gently and says she didn't know they had guests. With a hopeful look, Alicia thinks that thank goodness this means she is in the right place. Desperate, she tells the sister that she desperately needs to speak with her, almost begging, but the woman asks her to take it easy, for she notices her exhausted state from the journey, so she asks her to follow her to get out of the rain first. Alicia observes the place and already gets the impression that it is desolate, even for a monastery in the forest. Not to mention she doesn't know where the other people from there are. The sister takes her to a kitchen where a soup is being prepared. She takes a bit and hands it to the girl. The older woman then calls for her attention. She then asks what brings her to that humble little monastery. Alicia thinks carefully about what she will say. Then she throws herself on the ground, begging the sister to let her live there. Crying, she says she won't be demanding with her accommodations and doesn't mind staying in a shed or even in a stable if necessary. The sister touches her hand. With gentleness, she says she assumes the girl must have had a situation she cannot explain. The sister tells her to be at peace, because there is always a place in the monastery for those who need it, especially for a woman seeking refuge in the embrace of the goddess. She even gets into the mood, saying the bed will creak a lot and that on rainy days like this, they have to use all the buckets and plates to catch the dripping water. But they are not so poor as to reject a young woman in need. Already accepting her, the vestal calls the girl sister as she comforts her. In the imperial monastery, there is no priest. Due to the death of Father Michelando 16 years ago, formal visits from the central pantheon were interrupted, and only 2 vestals remain, and now Sister Alicia in training. One of the women calls for the blonde, who lets her know where she is. This humble monastery received perhaps 1 guest per year, if it was lucky, and usually just a lost traveler. But for the protagonist to find, it was like her own salvation. Obviously, nothing had been easy, whether as a saint or a witch. Alicia receives instructions on what to do with the clothing. It may seem like an easy task for ordinary people, but she had never done manual labor, so she truly is in training for everything. Even so, these moments in her life are precious. Sister Dorothea calls for the girl. With a worried look, Alicia says it is very cold there and curiously asks why the older woman is outside, not to mention she hasn't been feeling well lately. The woman laughs, saying she is fine. Dorothea says the night reminds her of the time when the blonde walked all the way there in the rain to find them. Looking at the sky, she reveals she had been very curious about something that day. How the eyes of a young woman could carry a kind of remorse one only sees in the elderly who have suffered every imaginable hardship. Dorothea leans closer to her and says, I thought to myself, this girl will stay with us for a long time. It felt like gaining a new member of the family, and Alicia has no idea how happy that made her. But the blonde feels that same warmth. And how could she not be grateful to someone who was the light in her darkness? One thing Alicia would like to ask Dorothea is how her eyes can be so kind and welcoming. Yet whenever they drift away, such deep sadness surrounds them. She wonders if that is why she never rejected her and why she treated her with such gentleness. the sister suggests they stop for the night and go back inside, since the night air is already growing stronger. Suddenly, the woman begins coughing. This terrifies Alicia, who says it is because the woman pushed herself too hard. But Dorothea tries to reassure her, saying winter is coming soon, and here in the monastery it is wild and cruel, so they must begin preparing for it quickly. Some time passes, and the sisters beg Dorothea to wake up. Her fever will not go down, which is apparently due to her illness worsening. Alicia wants to know what they should do in such a situation, but the sister says they have run out of medicine because recent storms prevented them from going out for more. Dorothea begins feeling even worse, worrying the two of them further, making Alicia realize that in this situation, there is nowhere they can take her. There are no medical facilities nearby. In desperation, she forces herself to think of a solution. Alicia remembers the conversation she had with Isidora, thanking the woman for sending donations every month to the Archelio Monastery, where the Monsignor resides. And it isn't that far from there. Oh, and she also learned that His Eminence's name is Edwin. That memory came as an answer to her question. It's him, the one who prayed for her while she was sick. Alicia is certain the Monsignor will help once he learns of the situation. Sister Irene laments that when she finally convinced her to see a doctor, things worsened. If only they had some way to lower the temperature, it would already be a relief. Hearing this, the new Vestal announces that she needs to go somewhere, which does not please the other, since besides Dorothea being very sick, it will soon get dark. But for Alicia, only one place comes to mind as a solution, so Irene wants to know where she intends to go at such an hour. Thus, the blonde tells her about Archelio Monastery. The place is not only the largest in the region, but also close to the capital, and she is sure there are resident doctors there. Irene wants to know how she intends to get there, since it is a full day's journey by horse and cart, not to mention her worry about Alicia planning to go alone. Alicia doesn't even listen. She rushes, saying she will find a way and asks Irene to take care of Dorothea until she returns. Irene is left behind despite her protests. The older woman finally wakes up. When she asks about Alicia, Irene tells her the truth, that she went in search of help at Archelio Monastery. Even weak, Dorothea notices something about the blonde. She holds her crucifix tightly and says they will need to discuss something regarding Alicia. Meanwhile, the blonde faces the storm outside, refusing to sit and do nothing but pray. Thus, she will do everything in her power to save Sister Dorothea. Alicia even begs God for help, terrified of losing her. But getting there will be difficult, so she needs a horse. But the man says he doesn't have one strong enough to make a round trip to the capital, especially in this demonic snow. And his conscience would be heavy letting an animal suffer such a journey. Even with Alicia insisting, he cannot help with that. She insists, saying that if she doesn't reach Archelio Monastery soon, Sister Dorothea will not survive. Alicia says that helping will repay him 10 times over, but the man refuses to negotiate about it. Another person approaches, noticing there is a problem. It is Master Nevton. That name is not unfamiliar to the girl because standing there is an old acquaintance. Nevton brightens when he sees her and asks what she is doing there wearing Vestal robes. Alicia is also surprised to see him there and wants to know what brings him to that part of the city. The man explains that his family's country house is nearby, the same one she used to visit when she was just a child. Jaren says he was on his way to deliver a message when he heard some commotion near the stables, so he decided to check it out. The master hugs the girl tightly, almost leaving her breathless with how happy he is to see her. Alicia realizes that with Jaren, things might improve. After all, they seem to have a good relationship, so she calls him immediately. Allie says she needs his help, and of course he would never refuse her, asking her to tell him the name and details along the way. Some time passes, and the cart that carried them finally stops on the road. Jaren wants to make sure she truly wants to do this alone, even offering to accompany her. The girl refuses and thanks him for everything he did, since bringing her there was enough. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by someone demanding they have a good explanation. His Eminence wants to know what they are doing outside a monastery at this hour. Alicia freezes at the sight of him, leaving Jaren to explain they are there because of a problem and asking if that is an issue. Edwin confirms it is, since they arrived boldly right at the end of the morning mass. Finally, the girl snaps back to reality and runs to Edwin. She begs him to spare her a moment because she has something she needs to say. His Eminence has a serious look. Then he takes the girl's hand and scolds her, saying it is clear she never received the formal education of a Vestal. Not to mention she forgot the rule that a Vestal cannot remain alone in the same space as a man, as if she had time to think about that while trying to save someone. Master Nevton intervenes, saying that his relationship with Allie should not be reduced to something so crude. The blonde apologizes for her manners and explains she came running due to an urgent matter and chose an improper method. Jaren tries to interrupt her, but Alicia says she is a Vestal in training. In other words, a postulant at the Imperial Monastery. The place draws His Eminence's attention. After all, it was abandoned by the Central Pantheon. and he remembers there were two Vestals taking care of it. Alicia immediately says that Sister Dorothea is very ill, explaining they had no resources to care for her weakened health, causing the situation to worsen. She then begs him, saying the goddess calls all brothers and sisters under her divine governance, and if that is true, then they are all family. The blonde pleads for mercy. Edwin finds it ironic that a Vestal postulant in training is giving a lesson on religious dogma to an older cleric, and he says she is truly remarkable. Alicia, realizing her audacity, apologizes again to the Monsignor, saying she didn't mean to, and thinks about how she committed a grave mistake. After all, she isn't even a formal member of the church yet, and she wonders how she could be stupid enough to speak to a cleric that way. Jaren steps in and questions whether he isn't being too harsh with a sister of faith. Immediately, Alicia pushes him back toward the cart, saying it would be better for him to leave, even though the master does not want to leave her with this man. But the blonde convinces him that everything is fine. And of course, she thanks him for bringing her there. Even so, Master Nevton will wait there while she does what she needs to do. Edwin goes ahead, and Alicia asks him to wait so she can explain the situation. His Eminence says he has no time to waste and that they need to find a doctor, so he tells her to follow. The girl does as instructed while wondering if this means he will grant her request. Edwin stops and asks for Dorothea's symptoms. Alicia is following him when she ends up stumbling. She crashes into Edwin's body and he prevents her from falling to the ground. Extremely embarrassed, she begins apologizing. Despite his serious expression, the cleric tells her to let it go and finish the discussion inside the facility, reminding her that Dorothea is counting on them. Upon arriving, Father Edwin is quick to establish orders and instructions. He recruits a doctor and a team of nuns to help provide care. All of this before sending everyone to the Imperial Monastery as soon as they are ready. And now she prays for everything to go well. The girl is interrupted by Sarah, a young nun from Arkelio Monastery, who wishes to speak with her. Alicia immediately stands, asking if Dorothea is all right, and the redhead asks her to calm down. The young nun explains that the older woman is able to sleep well at the moment, and that the worst has already passed, and now they just need to let her rest to regain her strength. Finally, Alicia can breathe in relief. She thanks everything she believes in for Sister Dorothea's salvation. Excited, Sarah informs her that from now on, Arkelio Monastery will send its members there regularly to monitor the health of the two sisters and help maintain the place. And those were Father Edwin's orders. This surprises the blonde greatly. So Sarah says that His Eminence dedicated a minute of his time to assess the situation. The door opens, ending the girls' conversation when someone calls for Alicia. Alicia responds to the call while wiping away the last tear. Irene asks her to come in for a moment. The two girls find the way she says it strange, but there is nothing to do but go find out. All the older members are gathered, and Sister Dorothea looks much better than before. The girl goes to her, asking how she feels and saying how relieved she is to see her finally awake. But before she can get close, she is stopped. Irene is extremely harsh, saying the girl must pack her things and leave Operial immediately. This already frightens the blonde so much that she even wonders if she heard wrong. She even says she must have misunderstood and asks her to explain what she means by leaving Operial Monastery, but Irene reinforces her words, that they cannot accommodate her as a postulant Vestal. Even with Alicia begging, the sister tells her to return to her room and take her things immediately. The girl throws herself at her feet, asking at least for a reason for such a decision. And if it is due to lack of resources, she can manage with what they have, even decrease her meal portions. Crying heavily, she says that this way it won't even feel like she lives there. But nothing sways Irene, who asks if she even knows the reason they made that decision. And from the girl's desperation, it's very clear she doesn't. The woman says she fled while one sister was sick in bed, but that was to save her. Irene continues, saying the girl made a decision and didn't even take a moment to give an explanation, revealing that they fear they cannot live alongside a selfish sister. Alicia then tries to plead with Dorothea, but the woman keeps an expression that agrees with everything. Even so, the girl begs. After all, she sought that place to save herself from a cruel fate. Dorothea seems about to say something, but silence is her answer and she turns her face away. Alicia says she has nowhere else to go, and remembers that night when the woman said this was a place that would never reject a girl in need, and she only wants this nightmare to be a lie, because there is no way all those smiles they gave her were fake. With nothing left to do, she accepts her fate. A letter was left with Father Edwin encouraging him to inquire further details with His Eminence and asking him to accept her in her name. The two say goodbye. Soon after, Alicia gets up and runs, saying she needs a moment alone. Edwin only watches everything in silence and gives one last look at the girl. Outside, Jaren asks if she is all right. Apologizing for overhearing the conversation, he asks if they were too harsh and already argues that it's not as if she did it on purpose, not to mention that this selfish act saved the sister. The master says that maybe this is for the best, since now she can return home knowing the Duke is very worried. Very softly, Alicia asks him to stop, but he continues, saying he didn't like the idea of her becoming a nun because that means she can't marry. So the girl simply explodes, making him fall silent. This even startles him and he apologizes. The girl explains that this has nothing to do with him and asks him to go back, saying there was no need for him to return all the way with her. Jaeron begs, saying she cannot disappear like that again. But all Alicia asks is that he return. Jaeron even tries to catch up to her, but there is no chance. Crying quietly, the blonde laments this. After all, she knows Nevton thought she was asleep in the cart last night when he courted her. However, she cannot return those feelings, especially when she has just been abandoned by people she loves once again, promising it will be the last time she opens her heart to anyone. When she meets Edwin, the priest asks if she is done crying and says he has been looking for her everywhere. The young woman apologizes for having run off without any explanation, but that is not what he came to talk about. Edwin is there to say that he clearly remembers having said he wished never to see her again, and he was surprised to see that Lady Sorcelian chose to become a postulant Vestal. Curious, he asks the reason why she chose that path. Alicia is surprised that he remembers her, but at the moment she wants to know whether he will expel her depending on her answer. She doesn't know what to do if she is rejected by the priest. Edwin still waits for her response. The man says that if the question is too difficult, he will ask another. Coming very close to her, he asks, "Do you truly wish to become a nun?" With him approaching so closely, it is Alicia who steps back. What truly worries her is the possibility of being rejected, but this has to be her last hope. With that look, the girl feels even more nervous. Finally, Alicia answers with certainty that she does want to become a nun. Even firmer, she says, "You may chase me away. Say I have no permission, but I will do whatever I can to become a Vestal." This determination is because she needs to live if she wants to seek revenge, and this is the only way. Edwin gives only a small smile. Then the man turns and asks her to follow him. Impressed that it is so simple, the girl asks if he doesn't need to ask more questions and whether there is any procedure she must follow. Finding it strange that it is this easy, he stops and asks why he would bother with all that trouble. After all, she said she would do anything to fulfill her purpose. Edwin makes it clear that he hates repeating himself, but says he received written authorization from Sister Irene and asked for her desire. Being direct, the priest says he is very busy with monastery matters and has already spent more time than necessary on this issue. Alicia is surprised that the sister left a letter. Edwin interrupts her thoughts, saying there was something she had no way of knowing. And truly, Alicia has no idea. Searching inside his vestments, he looks for something that will eventually reach her hands anyway, so he sees no problem in giving it in advance. The priest hands it to her, but this makes her nervous, since every letter she has ever received in life brought bad news. The letter says, "I express my sincere gratitude for traveling all this way through the snow. I imagine the walk must have been easy, and I hope this letter is not a burden to you. Please understand that there was nowhere else for the two of us to seek help. Irene and I have spent our days in Operial, keeping it peaceful, waiting for the day our Heavenly Mother calls us back home. However, last summer, Alicia came to us. For the past months, we have been fulfilling this young woman's wish. We do not want to leave Allie behind alone in an empty monastery, and she still needs help." The letter continues, "Your Eminence, I humbly ask that you show mercy to the three of us." Now to Allie, she writes, "If one day you read this letter, there is something I always wanted to tell you. I sincerely hope that one day you free yourself from the burden you carry. One must endure the harsh winter before receiving the spring, and I am certain that day will come soon. I once had a daughter who left this world early because she had a terrible mother. I did everything I could to save her, and spent the rest of my days in the harsh winter trying to pay for my sins. Then on a rainy night, I came across a young girl in the forest. Dear Alicia, you were the spring of my dark winter. I know I said we would have a picnic when it got warmer. I apologize for expelling you like this, but you would never leave Operial otherwise. Allie, I pray that you build more relationships that will set you free. I am sending my rosary along with this message. May the goddess use it to protect you at all times. With love, Sister Dorothea." The letter finally ends with the girl in tears, and Edwin simply asks if she is done crying. Alicia apologizes and takes the chance to ask if she may say one last goodbye to her sisters. But the priest does not advise that. Edwin says he does not know if she truly understands how difficult it was for the two of them to send her away. Not to mention they need to return to Arkelio Monastery, so he has no more time to waste on this matter. And he makes it clear that in the end, the decision is hers. Alicia folds her hands in prayer. She does so while looking at the place that sheltered her and served as the light on her dark path. She then puts on the rosary that once belonged to Sister Dorothea and follows Father Edwin, determined that wherever he goes, she will follow him. In another place, we follow the person responsible for the protagonist's suffering. He complains that he was promised he would obtain what he wanted this spring. The voice coming from the snake asks whether it has ever deceived him, and says that in the spring, a prophecy will be shared regarding a sanctity. All he needs to do is act as instructed, making it clear that it will grant everything he desires. Something draws the attention of the two. A strange noise comes from the door, and he believes it must have been some rats in the corners. But the snake speaks first and says that it warned him it would put all affairs in order. Prelate Labentius asks whether he should drive them out, but the serpent refuses, saying he does not need to do anything. It is all about the witch who left a trail for them to follow. And the snake says they have an amusing toy in their hands, though only one of them truly does. Some time passes, and it is spring when everything is already established at Arkelio Monastery. The cleric is accompanied by another robed brother. Edwin complains about the damned wrinkled old serpent, and the man beside him grows worried about his words since there are ears everywhere. Meanwhile, Alicia is busy with her tasks when she comments that the priests seem occupied, and she is curious to know why. Sarah then reveals the reason. The Mother Superior mentioned a new prophecy that was shared earlier. Carefree, the redhead says they must be in a bad mood because of the morning walk to the central pantheon for the interpretation of the prophecy, not to mention that the silver-haired one is not known for his friendliness. Finally, the young nun notices something is wrong with her sister. Alicia collapses to the floor, devastated by the news she just heard. Sarah asks if she is feeling well, clearly unaware that the prophecy that ruined the protagonist's life has been announced. A new meeting takes place, and many questions are raised regarding the prophecy disclosed the day before, especially since the last one occurred 120 years ago. That was during the devastating famine. Another person draws attention amid all this interrogation. Edwin asks whether the prophecy delivered just hours earlier has truly already been interpreted. Labentius does not miss the chance to comment that he does not seem very satisfied, and even provokes him, saying that the silver-haired cleric feels ashamed for not being the one to receive the prophecy directly. He also says, with a family history like his, anyone would feel that way. Remaining calm, Edwin says he has no desire to engage in this passive-aggressive power struggle with him, and justifies that he is only asking for an explanation since this deviates from previous practices, because something like this can have many interpretations and is generally deciphered together by a seer and a high priest. The prelate becomes defensive, questioning whether he is truly challenging and questioning the prophecy, but the cleric explains he is merely expressing concern because they may repeat the same mistakes as their ancestors. Like a serpent, the man approaches him and says, "This is a prophecy delivered by the Heavenly Mother herself to me, and not to a low-ranking priest like you." He also says he understands the young man's curiosity, since his family has always been enthusiastic about keeping records of all church matters. Then the man turns to everyone and becomes excited to share the prophecy. Enthusiastically, the prelate says, "The one who radiates golden sunlight and possesses cerulean gems, their light will guide the emperor's path." The man says this certainly foretells a saint who will come and illuminate the empire. He says it is quite straightforward, explaining that the golden sun refers to golden hair and the gems to the eyes, this combination being the definition of purity and sanctity. This time, Father Daniel expresses concern, saying that if the prophecy speaks of a male saint, this would cause great political turmoil, and asks him to take a moment to analyze it again. The prelate sarcastically says it is a shame and questions why the goddess would deliver a prophecy meant to cause conflict. He makes it clear that the central pantheon believes this opens the path for the establishment of a sanctity. Next, he orders all monasteries in the land to gather every woman with blonde hair and blue eyes and submit them to divine evaluation, for the peace of the goddess and for the great empire. Some clap in approval, while others do not seem very confident about it. Daniel whispers that this means there will be more victims. Edwin agrees completely. The silver-haired cleric says it will not be easy to try preventing this unless they find a way to bury the tasteless old witch and put her 2 feet under the ground, and his colleague reprimands him, reminding him they are still in the pantheon. His concern is due to the error that occurred 120 years ago, when a prophecy appeared at Arkelio Monastery, promising the end of the famine that had already lasted 3 years, saying the famine would end when sacred hands gathered and presented 100 pure pearls, and it was interpreted as a sacrifice of 100 virgins, leading to the senseless capture of civilian girls, their heads placed on the altar, and even then the famine continued. But the members of Arkelio Monastery gave the prophecy a more literal interpretation and handpicked 100 untouched pearls from the sea to place upon the altar, and only then did the rain begin to fall. The central pantheon concealed all and any evidence of this incident, and the only records that remain are secretly kept in the monastery's library. The language of prophecy can have many meanings and is dangerous, as the altar will forever be stained with the struggle and life essence of innocent young women. Irritated, the silver-haired cleric thinks that such a farce cannot be allowed to happen a second time. Back to Alicia, the girl finally awakens, extremely startled as though she had suffered a terrible nightmare. On top of that, her head feels like it is going to explode from the pain, not to mention the confusion of not knowing what happened, until she remembers that she fainted upon hearing the news of the prophecy, and Sarah brought her back to her room. Alicia lets out a sigh. Very saddened, she realizes that something has been bothering her deep inside ever since she discovered how to avoid becoming a saint, and perhaps even before that. She is torn because the issue is, if she does not become the saint, someone else will. Labentius will certainly find another girl who resembles her and turn her into his puppet to use and exploit as he pleases. Alicia believes her silence will become just as despicable as everyone else who never spoke up. But even so, she cannot voluntarily walk into that trap knowing what she knows. That is why she must make a choice. The girl goes to Sister Susanna. The woman asks about her condition since she heard she had not been feeling well, and the blonde assures her she is much better now. Alicia asks whether it is possible for nuns to confess, which surprises the older woman. Susanna confirms it and explains that the church and its facilities are for all believers, including the servants of the great goddess. However, she says that Father Edwin has not left his office since returning from the Pantheon this morning. She says the man is probably researching the new prophecy, so perhaps the confession could wait until next week. A little insecure, the girl says she has something she needs to share today. Therefore, she does not mind waiting, and asks the sister if she could inform Father Edwin that she will be waiting in the chapel. Even finding it a bit strange, Susanna accepts. Alicia did exactly what she told the woman. She stayed there for so long that it is already night. She believes that perhaps Father Edwin will not appear. However, her doubt is soon resolved, because at that moment the man appears. But with him there, the girl ends up feeling sad. The priest begins reciting, "That the Heavenly Mother be in your heart and help you confess your sins with true repentance." Alicia begins by asking forgiveness for remaining silent despite knowing everything, and upon hearing her voice, Edwin realizes who is inside the confessional and laments, since he already has enough problems. Carrying out his duty, he asks what it is she remains silent about. Then she recites the prophecy. The one who radiates golden sunlight and possesses cerulean gems. His light will guide the Emperor's path. Hearing this, the priest immediately opens the door, stepping out of the confessional. He goes to the girl and demands that she explain, that Alicia tell him how she knows about the prophecy. After all, it has not yet been disclosed to the public, so he demands to know how she could possibly know. First, the blonde asks him to accept her apologies. Kneeling before him, she confesses that she learned about it around 6 months ago, and that it would be shared during the spring, as well as the fact that it was already known that a girl would be falsely chosen as a saint due to the Central Pantheon's mistaken interpretation. And she says, with tears in her eyes, she will be labeled a witch before having her life taken. Alicia begs the priest to help her so they can prevent this tragedy from happening. Edwin considers the possibility that this is true, but irritated, he questions why she only said something now, because had he known earlier, measures could have been taken and he could have prepared better. The young nun reveals that she had not said anything before because she was the girl who met a terrible death. He is surprised at first when he hears that, but then he laughs, asking if she came from the future and whether she expects him to believe such nonsense. Alicia understands this is difficult to believe, and for a priest, he has very little faith. The girl does not give up and says that deep in his heart, Edwin feels something is wrong with the prophecy. After all, he locked himself in his office ever since his visit this morning. She asks if he is not searching for alternative answers to counter the Pantheon's interpretation. Edwin becomes startled. It is as if the girl had been watching him the whole time like a ghost without him noticing, for he truly had spent the entire day occupied with that, unable to believe such a ridiculous explanation. Upon analyzing it, he realized there is a strong chance that everything is merely a metaphor, and he needs to find records to try putting an end to this madness. Back in the present, Edwin confirms that he has been doing exactly that, searching through records and manuscripts ever since he returned. However, not convinced by what she said, he is unsure of where or how she heard about the prophecy, but knowing it alone is not enough reason to trust her or help her. Alicia then surprises him by asking whether Labentius interpreted the phrase as meaning that the saint would be someone with blonde hair and blue eyes. The young nun calls out to him, begging through tears that he take a good look at her. A blonde with blue eyes, calm, gentle, pliable, and the daughter of a duke of the empire. In other words, a perfect candidate to satisfy that man's desires. Still reluctant, the priest says it is ridiculous, but honestly admits he would like to believe her. The problem is that none of it makes any sense, and she understands that it is difficult. Alicia thinks the priest may believe she is sick and suffering from hallucinations. Even so, she cannot give up yet. Seeing the girl stand, Edwin asks where she is going. She does not answer. She only makes sure that all the curtains are closed. Alicia had not expected to have to do this, just as she had needed to show her father and Izzy after her return to the past. A night when the moonlight entered her room, and its light fell upon the wound on her back. Alicia can clearly remember that moment, when the malicious victor said mockingly that it would be impolite to refuse a gift from the Emperor. Even as she screamed and begged, he burned that mark into her back, While thinking about this, the girl begins removing her robe, because it is the only proof she has. Edwin stares at the scene in shock. The priest asks what she is doing, reminding her that they are in a sacred place. Alicia ignores him as she prepares to reveal the evidence that the goddess returned her to the future. Apologizing to the cleric, she says this is the only way to show her memory and shame. Then she asks him to look closely at the mark on her back. Shocked, Edwin asks how she got that, recognizing it as the mark given to traitors or for other severe crimes. Crying, she explains that it was given to her by the Crown Prince Victor himself before her execution, a scar left by someone she loved more than anyone in the world. But at least it is the only proof she has that she has already lived through this timeline once before. Edwin is honest with the girl, because even if it is true, it still makes no sense to him. Once she becomes a Vestal, it is no longer something she needs to worry about, so he asks why she is putting herself through this. Alicia says the reason she is committing this sin and exposing her body, even though she is a humble servant of the great goddess, is because she cannot allow another girl to be sacrificed because of her own selfishness, yet she still wants to survive. The girl remembers the time she was asked why she wanted to become a nun, and now she can finally give an answer. Alicia reveals that she did not become one to devote her life to the Heavenly Mother, but to ensure her own safety, and she does not care about the shame or punishment she may receive. She only asks for his help, for they cannot allow an innocent life to be sacrificed because of the greed of the powerful, and those people must pay for their sins. Once more, she begs him to believe her and help. In the end, Edwin accepts, but makes it clear he is still a bit disoriented by this information, and is already expecting all of it to be complete nonsense. The priest approaches her, giving legitimacy to her confession. Alicia thanks the goddess, feeling once again as though she is standing upon thin ice in her faith. This means she can save not only herself, but also the new saint. Finally, in his room, the priest thinks about the day, being buried up to his neck dealing with the social assistance plan for the lower class when the prophecy of the sanctity appeared, becoming yet another problem in his hands. He also doesn't know what to think of Alicia having claimed she came from the future, feeling almost insane. The silver-haired man grabs the cup beside him and pours it over his own head to regain control, because he is no longer a boy going through puberty, and he cannot forget that he is a priest who has taken a vow of chastity. Edwin spent his entire life devoted to the monastery, which would make anyone think he is immune to such things. He goes to Daniel's room, knocks on the door, receives permission to enter, and surprises his colleague by standing there completely soaked. The silver-haired priest needs his partner to contact Father Marco because they must perform the nuns' baptisms a little earlier this year. In the morning, the blonde meets Sister Sarah. The redhead is excited that they will soon become nuns. However, she comments on her curiosity as to why the baptisms are being done earlier than usual this year, since normally it is about 2 weeks later. In any case, she is happy about it, but Alicia feels a bit guilty because she knows the truth behind it. That night, Edwin had asked how he could help her. Alicia begins by asking if he knows what allows a woman to be exempt from this selection process. He does know, those of advanced age, as indicated by the divine scriptures, girls who have not yet reached adulthood, and women in service of the Heavenly Mother. Upon mentioning the last category, he realizes the girl's intention. Alicia says she is still a postulant Vestal because she has not yet been baptized, which places her in a precarious position regarding the upcoming divine evaluations. So Edwin asks if she wishes to become a formal Vestal of the monastery, and if this truly is the blonde's desire. The priest agrees since it is a situation he can control and asks what she intends to do afterward. Since he is only a priest, he has no authority to protect her from the prophecy. She knows that, and soon another girl will be chosen to become the false saint, and people will believe she is a witch and eliminate her. Alicia intends to do everything she can to prevent that, even if it means eliminating everyone who contributes to placing that girl in such a situation, including a real saint if necessary. The priest looks at her and says that is not a very appropriate thing to say at the moment. Alicia laughs, realizing she went too far. She says she simply felt the priest might be able to help her, making the silver-haired man question what gave her that impression. With her charm, the blonde answers that it is based on their encounters so far. Dismissing it, the priest tells her to stop with the nonsense. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrives, and as the holy water falls upon her head, the words are said, "Now you are anointed, brought closer to the goddess than any other mortal being." And it continues, "You will fulfill the duties of the church with faith and devotion, care for the weak and poor of the empire, and abandon all that you possessed in your previous life." Alicia feels relieved that this has finally happened, thus taking a step forward. Later that night, at the Sorcelian estate, the Duke is informed that someone told Labentius about the prophecy before it was formally delivered, but there is no way to confirm who is responsible. Theodore asks the man to investigate the matter more deeply. Alone, he thinks about how his daughter may have truly told him the truth, and concludes that that man is manipulating the prophecy. It is not easy to take action considering the close relationship between the crown and the church. Therefore, he needs to discover how long the emperor has been trusting Laurentius, but at least he can feel more at ease knowing his daughter was safely baptized. But there is something else. Sighing, he asks his beloved Helena to watch over Allie. Suddenly, something catches his attention outside. Although he finds the bird unusual, he assumes the troubling news must have made him anxious. Looking at the black bird in the night sky, he hopes he is simply overthinking. Edwin is gathered with the old man, who comments that the palace has begun spreading rumors about a selection process for saints and has already received several applications. Then he asks how many are actually worth considering. The priest says that counting the voluntary candidates and those gathered by the monasteries, there are about 100 women. The silver-haired man knows that Laurentius wants a girl who is thin, beautiful, and elegant, and will not pay attention to anyone older or who does not meet his criteria. Laurentius responds immediately, saying none of them can possibly be suitable. She must look like a traditional saint, thin and beautiful, and of course, even better if she is stupid and submissive. This disgusts Edwin, that they must call this man a priest. He asks the elder what he would do in the case of a woman refusing to participate in the divine evaluation. Laurentius says, "Do you honestly think that is an acceptable response to the sacred prophecy?" Raising his voice, he says that it is not refusal but treason. Then he mocks him, saying that is why he always says the silver-haired priest still has a long way to go. Laurentius claims that this is the most respectable thing a humble woman can do. After all, who would be foolish enough to refuse the chance to become both saint and empress at the same time? Edwin replies that he understands what he means and that it is very merciful of him. But they must not forget that the goddess who created this land descended to inhabit the body of a mortal woman, and that men were first created from the flesh of women. Feeling offended, Laurentius asks if he is giving him a lesson. Gently, the silver-haired cleric denies it, saying he would never go against the word of such a holy man in such a high position. And so he bids the old man farewell. Laurentius stays behind, wishing the young priest would get beaten up. At that moment, that crow enters the room through the window. The talking bird says, "What a funny look you have." Its visit is to ask about the candidates, and it asks whether those papers on the table are the applications. The old man confirms, but has doubts about them. The creature confirms that they indeed aren't good, but says it doesn't matter because it found something better. And that is thanks to the rat that was spying on them last time. But for the perfect candidate, the old man will have to pull a few strings. Another morning arrives, and as soon as she wakes up, Allie stretches her body. She is greeted by Sister Sarah, who tells her to hurry and get ready before she earns a scolding from Susanna. Alicia notices her reflection in the mirror. She remembers seeing someone who looked like her in her dream, or perhaps not. And it is just the stress from everything that happened in the last few days. This makes her think about Father Edwin, who continues to be very attentive and helpful. Not to mention that, being busy going back and forth from the central pantheon, the silver-haired priest doesn't look very well. So the blonde decides she will check if he needs anything. The girl had to gather leftovers from the morning onto a tray, and although it looks quite appetizing, her intention is good. Alicia heard that the priest has been skipping meals because of the saint's nomination, so she at least wants to take care of him. Taking advantage of the open door, the blonde steps into the room. She announces the meal but can't continue speaking because what she sees catches her completely off guard. Edwin is wearing only a simple white shirt, unbuttoned, exposing his toned stomach, and he asks if she hasn't learned to knock. Allie turns her face away while apologizing, adding that since the door was open, she didn't think to knock. Again, she apologizes and says she will return later. Before she can leave, the priest stops her and says that surely she has been told he hasn't had time to sit down and eat a full meal. Blushing, the girl stammers, confirming the information and saying she assumed it was from exhaustion, and acted impulsively because she wanted to help, ending up careless. Deep down, she feels bad for making another mistake in front of the Monsignor. Edwin looks curiously at the tray in her hands. Then he thanks Sister Alicia. This will be his first full meal in a long time, which easily brings a smile to the girl's face. The priest finds her strange and contradictory. She had the audacity to undress in front of him to expose a shameful part of herself, yet she seems so timid and insecure over something as ordinary as food. Meanwhile, he can't bring himself to reject it. The cleric asks if she prepared everything. Alicia confirms, but makes it clear she is still learning to cook, apologizing again and telling him he can remove anything he doesn't want to eat. Edwin doesn't even wait for her to finish before taking the tray from her hands. Analyzing the soup, he says it is watery and has too many carrots. There is something else he cannot identify that doesn't seem well cooked. Hearing this, she regrets it, thinking she did something foolish. The priest tastes the food. He says the coating is good and crisp, and there is nothing like warm food to open the appetite. Turning to her, Edwin says it may not be an appropriate topic to share during a meal and reveals they are reducing the number of candidates for the sanctity. Alicia worries that things are progressing and says he will soon be preparing to gather the women for the divine evaluation. The conversation is interrupted when Sarah calls the girl. She receives a scolding from the priest, who tells her not to run or make so much noise in the cleric's quarters. The redhead apologizes, explaining she heard Alicia's voice and ended up running. Alicia asks if something happened to require her to come in such a hurry. Sarah looks at her hesitantly, saying it is something terrible. She tells her that the Duke of Sorcelion fell and lost consciousness. This leaves the blonde extremely worried. Alicia overwhelms the girl with questions. How, why, and who gave the news? Sarah says a friend sent a message, and since it seemed urgent, she intervened so it would reach her faster. Crying, the blonde says she needs to go back home. However, she still needs to know whether she is allowed to leave. After all, her life is now dedicated to the goddess. Even so, she decides she might be able to discuss it with Sister Susanna. It is Edwin who intervenes, saying there is no need to go to the woman when he is right there and can help, and explains that a Vestal baptized at the Arkelio Monastery may return home once every 6 months. He tells her he will take care of things there and asks the girl to hurry. The priest asks Sarah to bring the documents. The redhead immediately leaves to fulfill the request, leaving only the two of them again. Alicia confesses that her heart feels tight because her father never suffered any accident in her previous life. She wonders if this is because she became a Vestal. If something happens to the Duke, she doesn't know what she would do. Edwin approaches her, asking her to calm down. As a priest, he begins with advice, saying she will have plenty of time to think things through when she sees Theodore's condition in person, then tells her to first try to find a carriage to take her back home. A little calmer, the girl agrees. She asks where she can find a carriage on short notice. Edwin admits he would be surprised if she knew, since she has not lived there long, but he will handle that as payment for the meal. So he will ask someone to take her back home as quickly as possible and suggests she return to her room and pack her things. Very happily, Alicia thanks the priest. Somewhere else, a beautiful young woman is in her room. Her father appears, curious to know if he needs to leave. He comments that things are very tense because of all this chaos surrounding the new saint. But the girl is not very interested, saying that even though she has golden hair and blue eyes, she does not have a shred of divine power in her. And besides, she never desired it, and with her personality, she doubts it could happen. The father tries to explain that it is not as simple as she thinks, but she ignores him when she notices the time, realizing the perfume she ordered must be ready for pickup, and says she will return before he notices she is gone. He asks her to wait a moment. The girl turns around, and she looks extremely similar to the protagonist. Her name is Abigail. Back to Alicia, she is outside with the priest and the sister. She is very grateful for all the attention he gave to this matter. But Edwin does not want all that attention, saying it would be shameful if one of his Vestals couldn't manage to get a carriage to return home, which makes the protagonist unsure whether he is kind or strict. As for the redhead, she is always affectionate even in matters that do not involve her. Like now, when she wishes Alicia a good trip and says she will miss her. Alicia holds her hand as she thanks her for all the support, saying she will return before she even notices. The girl is the main reason the protagonist managed to quickly adapt to her new life there. The blonde is about to leave when she is called. She stops and turns around, asking the priest if he has something he wants to say. Edwin opens his mouth, but the words barely come out. It makes him very nervous just thinking about how worried he is about this woman, so the only thing he says is to ignore it, changing the subject and making it clear he has a lot of work to do. For a moment, Alicia imagined he would say something else, but it would certainly be inconvenient if he were not there when things get hectic. Soon, it doesn't take long before she arrives at the Sorcelion mansion. To savor the nostalgia, she makes a point of looking at everything she used to walk past, like the flowers that bloomed in spring, creating a beautiful scenery around the mansion thanks to a skilled hand caring for them. Being away for so long makes Alicia wonder if everything was always this big, feeling like a stranger in the place where she was born and raised. But there is no time for reminiscing, because her priority is her father. She hurries to find him but stops when someone calls her. It is Izzy, eyes filled with tears. The woman asks why she is there since she did not announce she was visiting, floods her with questions, and notices that the little girl she raised looks thinner than before. But Alicia is only worried about her father and wants to know if his condition is very bad. Isadora only says that at the moment they have a guest. Count Manuel Miller appears, praising and greeting his niece, saying she has grown so much he barely recognized her. He says the last time he saw her, she was just a little girl, and she laughs, agreeing that it has been more than a decade since their last meeting. Manuel is there to visit Theodore, which the Duke would have done himself if he had not been injured, so he ran to the mansion, worried that something terrible had happened. The Count then changes the subject, noticing that there has been a significant change in his niece's life. Alicia only smiles gently, saying she had some things to contemplate. Manuel says he feels the same way with Abigail all the time, but youth at her age can be so unpredictable, and he comments that Theodore must be stunned that his only daughter has become a Vestal. Hearing the girl's name makes Alicia remember that she has a cousin. When she was young and her mother was still alive, her uncle and aunt used to visit the estate. They have a daughter the same age as her. The protagonist believes that maybe it was because her mother, the countess, looked so much like her aunt that the children also looked alike, making people think they were twins. Alicia asks about the whereabouts of her cousin, and the man realizes it has been a long time since the two last saw each other. The uncle explains that his daughter is the same as always, and that she left earlier to pick up a perfume he had recommended, which was ready for pickup. Then the man lets slip his concern that the Empire is on alert due to the news about a saint, so he is always telling Abigail to be careful, even though she doesn't listen. Alicia asks if her cousin went out without an escort, and Manuel confirms, although he isn't entirely certain. Trying not to show too much concern, the girl asks if her cousin intends to apply for the divine evaluation. This makes the Count laugh. He tells her not to worry because he does not want his daughter to take on the responsibility of becoming a saint, and asks if that wasn't the reason her own father sent her to the monastery. Alicia does not answer right away, thinking of a better and less suspicious reply. She answers that she is going through a rebellious phase, making the man laugh, though she still feels uneasy. Meanwhile, Abigail is going through an embarrassing moment. Even though the shop was closed that day, the employee said she could pick up her perfume, and because of that, she decided to go alone. Arriving there, it doesn't seem to be the case, and they are not the type of place to make mistakes like that. She thinks about informing the madam, certain that the receipt has the date. Abigail pulls out the paper, realizing that is not the store's seal. The girl doesn't even notice there are people behind her, and when she turns around, it is already too late. Then we return to the priest. Edwin is exhausted, but the to-do list never ends. And on top of that, the person who made him an important request is now on leave. He suddenly remembers his farewell with Alicia. He still cannot believe that he is worried about someone else. That girl appeared out of nowhere and disrupted his peaceful life. A duke's daughter who never needed to lift a finger for anything. And the second time he saw her, she was covered in dust with her skin blistered from the cold. She came to him declaring that she used to be a saint and a sinner who knew everything but closed her eyes, which the priest finds completely understandable for a human being. And even so, she confessed it while shedding tears of guilt, exposing the shameful scar she received in her darkest moment. Then Edwin remembers the face she made, worried that the food was bad. But thinking about these things is foolish. He wants to focus back on work. His new concern is that it has been a while since he last visited the Central Pantheon, and he believes they must be close to choosing the next saint. Only 5 women entered the final round of eliminations, but all of them are commoners, and Labentius is probably not happy with that. Edwin only hopes the man is not trying to execute some hidden plan. Suddenly, Daniel enters the room in a hurry, already saying that a saint has been chosen, but it was said that it is not one of the 5 finalists. Somewhere, Abigail wakes up very disoriented and with a headache. Her vision is still blurry, so she cannot recognize the people there, nor the place she is in. Looking more carefully, she recognizes that she is in the Central Pantheon. One of the men approaches, lamenting that she was brought there in this manner. He introduces himself as Labentius, the High Prelate. Abigail asks what is happening there, and is startled that he knows her name. In any case, she demands a proper explanation for why she was brought as if she had committed some kind of sin. With that usual tone of his, the man ironically asks if that bothered her. It doesn't matter, because he declares that this way is better, for he will take great pleasure in teaching her. He agrees that under normal circumstances, no one is brought to the Pantheon in this manner. However, he declares that no religious dissenter ever deserves to be treated with respect. This leaves the girl confused, but Abigail has no time to think because someone screams to be released. She recognizes one of the maids from her house. Labentius explains that the woman recently participated in the divine evaluation using the name Abigail Malaire. He thinks it's a strange coincidence to have 2 girls with the same name. To him, it was simply her father trying to protect her. But to the prelate, this was a terrible sin against the desires of the church that the blonde girl committed. Terrified, Abigail doesn't want to believe that her father did something so awful. She is taken back to a conversation she had with the man, asking whether she shouldn't participate in the divine evaluation since she meets all the requirements. But her father told her not to worry because he would take care of it. Putting all of that together, she realizes his plan was to put another girl in her place. Meanwhile, Labentius begins lecturing her, saying that only religious dissidents would be bold enough to go against the will of the great goddess. Then he explodes in anger, shouting that since she is supposedly under the protection and mercy of the goddess, it is unacceptable for her to behave this way, and he is sure she doesn't know that the punishment is not only losing her title and property. The man grabs her forcefully, making her look at him and says, however, the Central Pantheon is a place where they can show the mercy of the good goddess, and that if she agrees to be submitted to the divine evaluation, he gives his word that her involvement in this matter will be ignored. Abigail is completely terrified, and at that moment he asks what she would like to do. Meanwhile, Alicia enters the office announcing that she is back home. The man immediately brightens when he sees his daughter. She is frightened to see the bandage on her father's neck. Alicia asks if he is okay, and the Duke agrees. Even so, she doesn't believe it, panicking and denying that it could be true because of his terrible condition and all those bandages. Theodore says that is exactly why he wanted to hide it from her, but Izzy simply couldn't resist the temptation of causing all this fuss. He got scolded by the woman for wanting to keep it a secret, and his own daughter scolds him too, asking why he tried to hide it, especially knowing she is the only thing he has left. Theodore apologizes. Then she wants to know how the accident happened. She explains that in the timeline she came from, he never got hurt, so she is sure it's an anomaly, and asks if the man noticed anything unusual recently. The Duke mentions that there is something that has been bothering him, the crows, and he asks if she knows what that means. Hearing that makes the girl anxious. But going back a few days, the Duke was worried about his niece. After all, the two girls look extremely similar to their mothers. Although he trusted Manuel had taken the correct preventive measures after hearing his warning, he knew that wouldn't be enough. So he met with that man, asking him to deliver a letter to Count Malaire, because knowing that Ali had told the truth, the Pantheon wouldn't let it go. That is why he made the visit, to warn him just to be safe. He was thinking about sending the girls abroad until everything calmed down. Then, during the trip, he noticed the presence of crows, which are usually not common in the area. Soon they became agitated, causing confusion and frightening the horse. Thus, the man fell to the ground and got hurt. After finishing his account of the accident, Theodore mentions the crows. There aren't many around the Sorcellian estate, but suddenly many began to appear, and he believes it has some meaning for his daughter. Of course it does. And thinking about it makes Alicia nervous because it is about Sua. The girl believes it is because of that trick used to provoke her, and this time, for having harmed her father, she will not forgive the witch. Daniel explains the situation more clearly. He was informed about the kidnapping of a noble's daughter while the Platinado was absent from the Pantheon, as well as the case of the father sending another girl in her place. This already makes the priest sigh, since out of all the tactics they could have used, they chose this one. Edwin then deduces that they found the real girl and brought her in. Daniel confirms this and laments that it is too late to do anything about it. The cleric asks his colleague to keep an eye on the Pantheon's affairs. Curious, Daniel allows himself to ask the reason for this sudden interest in the matter. After all, it was inevitable that the church would choose a woman as the saint one way or another. Of course, he also does not intend to ignore the Pantheon's corrupt actions, and he understands Edwin's concerns, because if the church led this search, it would only result in more power for them, not to mention the significant advantage in deciphering the prophecy. After hearing all this, Edwin only wants to know what the point of it all is. Daniel almost regrets what he said because of the priest's bad temper. He never knows where he stands with him. The young man is direct and asks if there are other motives at play there. Edwin does not answer. He only repeats the question. Even without saying what it is, the image of the person who made him get more deeply involved in all this immediately comes to his mind. The Platinado says that there is absolutely nothing beyond the reasons already mentioned, and asks why he would spend sleepless nights trying to stop the investigation of a new saint. He says it is simply a matter of aligned interests, which makes Daniel curious about what those are, but everything he needs to know has already been said. Edwin hands him a signed paper, which the dark-haired man finds strange since they already handled all the paperwork. Daniel goes to snoop and ends up surprised by the content. It is a leave form, and the young man reacts like that because he filled out his first. Trying to take advantage, the Platinado asks who is supposed to conduct the mass if Daniel leaves. After all, it cannot be Father Marco, who has mobility issues and would struggle to celebrate an entire mass. Holding back tears, Daniel tries to justify himself but ends up stuttering. And to make things worse, Edwin asks if he expected him to conduct the mass alone. Daniel bursts into tears, begging, because this is the first time he has visited his home in a year, and he has already sent letters announcing his arrival. But compared to him, the Platinado has not visited his family for the last 3 years and 6 months. The dark-haired priest despairs even more. Using an even greater advantage, Edwin says that the monastery is under his leadership and asks whether his colleague has forgotten what that means. He mentions that he also had to make sacrifices and adjust his visits, but now his family is insisting that he go see them as soon as possible, and so he closes the matter. Father Daniel cries even more, declaring that the Platinado is the devil at his doorstep. Either way, Edwin cheerfully says goodbye, saying he will see him soon when he returns to the monastery. Edwin continues his trip in a carriage. In silence, he takes the opportunity to reflect on Daniel's question about whether he has another reason to be so invested in the prophecy. A similar thought comes to mind about the count who sent another girl in his daughter's place. This becomes increasingly difficult. At least Lady Malaire is a distant relative of the Sorcellians, which means Alicia must know who they are. He knows this will be a harsh revelation for the girl, who cannot even bear the thought of a stranger occupying the place that once belonged to her. The Platinato also realizes something is wrong with him because he is strangely very concerned about this news, accepting that Father Daniel only spoke the truth. Now we go to Abigail, who is completely settled in the Pantheon, even her clothes having been changed. She thinks about the events from an hour ago. She had been asked to step forward. It is a kind of test where she must place drops of her vital fluid into the water. Labentius says that if she is not a saint, the water will remain the same, but if she is, it will turn crystalline. Terrified, Abigail rejects the idea, throwing the dagger to the floor since she had not been informed there would be physical harm. The prelate stays calm and says he understands why she is like this, since she grew up protected with the idea that blood would terrify her, lamenting that they missed that detail. Then he picks up the blade and, with a frightening look, says, "This leaves us no choice but to ask a servant of the goddess to lend you a hand." His words make Abigail very afraid. Labentius approaches her even as she begs him to stay away, and the girl argues that this information was never disclosed when they were searching for the saint. She says that when the outside world finds out about this, the man will certainly face punishment. The girl falls to the ground and the prelate reaches her, saying, "The grace of the goddess will be with you. You do not need to fear." Taking her hand, he says he will make sure it will not hurt. Then he pours the girl's essence into the sacred water. Afterward, he looks at the result with great joy. The water has been purified, and he declares that he had been waiting for her for a long time. Abigail finds it impossible and thinks it must be some kind of trick, while Labentius celebrates, congratulating her for becoming the new saint of the empire. But with tears in her eyes, Lady Malaire doubts this. Suddenly, something catches her attention. A woman approaches and, smiling, says she was told the girl's perfume was ready to be picked up. Abigail cannot understand why her maid is there. Labentius comes closer with a smile, saying he knows the saint has a great fondness for perfumes, so he prepared a small gift in advance. He places a bottle in her hand and asks whether it is the one she bought. The man says he hopes she likes it. Abigail thinks about the newly hired maid, the one who told her about a special perfume shop, certainly a trap to capture her. Everything was a plan to turn her into a saint. Irritated and with tears of rage in her eyes, she throws the stupid perfume on the floor, since everything was because of it. The glass shatters at the prelate's feet, but to him, this is divine. He finds it a beautiful image of sacrifice. Then with the phrase, "I'd say we couldn't have asked for a better actress for the role," Sua enters, returning to a few days before the divine evaluation. The prelate becomes nervous with the master's suggestion that he would need to pull more strings. The creature says it followed the rat that had been hiding last time and discovered that it works for the Sorcelians. Originally, the plan was to make their daughter the saint, but the girl ended up becoming a Vestal before he had the chance. The Raven says it found the timing too coincidental, so it investigated and ended up finding a perfect substitute. Abigail Malaire, her cousin, who resembles her very much. She is the perfect image of what it had in mind, and besides being beautiful, she is thin. It says that beauty will distract the stubborn people of the Empire. Labentius understands the plan but remains thoughtful, saying he is almost certain that the daughter of Count Malaire already completed her divine evaluation, as there is no way he would have forgotten a noble candidate. The Raven makes it clear that someone else was sent in her place. After all, humans are so predictable. However, the prelate wants to know what pulling the strings truly means, and the creature responds that they must make Abigail Malaire the saint. The creature says this is certainly much easier than what he had to do to reach his current position. Then it asks him to reveal his true form. Sua asks him to remember who was the one who brought him to where he is now, and that she will ensure he becomes the Pope. The witch says that humans will do anything to please a god, even eliminate innocent women, and asks what a mortal wouldn't do for the love of an almighty being, finding the idea utterly pathetic and ridiculous. Approaching him, she declares, "You will be the one who saves these poor souls, having chosen him herself to serve her, and the man must follow her orders." Sua reveals she secretly placed one of her girls in Count Malaire's household and tells him to use her as he sees fit. Labentius agrees with his beautiful and powerful goddess. Meanwhile, Alicia throws herself onto her big, soft bed. It's been a long time since she has rested properly. Her life is madness, one thing happening after another in these past months. In her home, she doesn't need to do anything to have good food and a comfortable bed. Mornings at the Arkelio Monastery are always chaotic, with the sisters shouting for her to hurry and get ready, because there is always a busy day ahead. It made her realize how protected and spoiled she used to be, but it's not the moment to focus on that. Still, the girl thinks about using this break to rest as much as she can and forget all the little complications, but her plans are ruined by Izzy. The maid says she must get ready, but the blonde has no idea why. Then Isadora reveals that Monsignor Edwin is there. Desperate, Alicia asks why he is there, but the maid has no way of knowing, and that is the exact question the woman wants to ask. She says the man came from far away dressed in an unusual manner, looking for the girl, which is very curious. So Izzy wants her to tell her the secret. Alicia blushes and says she has no idea what she is talking about, not understanding the way the maid spoke about the priest. To speed things up, Izzy helps her with her clothes. When she finally meets Edwin, his outfit is surprisingly different from usual, making him look like a true lord, and the man also comments on the time she took. Laughing embarrassedly, the girl asks if she made him wait too long. She looks away shyly because of the comment. She may not be a true believer, but she is still an active member of the monastery, and she also feels something about this meeting seems wrong and secretive. For some reason, Alicia doesn't want to show her refined and polished side. Breaking the silence, the girl wants to know the reason for his visit, but Edwin tells her to come with him. It is completely confusing, so he repeats more clearly for her to come. The priest asks if she doesn't want to do this, leaving Alicia even more confused with the situation, but she accepts anyway, impressed that the young man can make such an expression. The priest's idea is to take a walk around the city. He watches in silence and even with a certain curiosity as the blonde puts on a hat for the outing. Alicia asks him not to mind her. This tactic is because she thought it was better to hide her hair considering everything that is happening. She then asks what he meant by taking her so far from the estate. The man looks around, very suspicious, and starts walking, asking her to follow him. Edwin walks ahead very quickly, leaving the girl behind, who tries to catch up with him. Alicia ends up bumping into someone. Luckily, Edwin doesn't let her fall, and asks, "Has anyone ever told you that you're quite demanding?" Alicia apologizes while trying to step away, uncomfortable with how close he is. While they walk side by side, she feels something is wrong. The two of them went to watch a play. Then they looked around the craft market. Finally, they stopped at a pastry shop. And all of this made the girl feel as if she were on a date. The priest has been looking at her in such a serious and awkward way the whole day, as if he were doing these things for the first time. But the truth is, they don't have that kind of relationship. And this makes Alicia think Edwin is gathering the courage to deliver bad news. Even though he seems like a person without emotion, Alicia feels that deep down he is a kind person. And she understands he is waiting for the right moment to say it. So she wants to end this already and asks if there is something he wants to tell her. Her theory is that it is related to the sainthood. Alicia says that whatever it is fine for him to say it. She asks him to go ahead and speak. But before that, let's go back to a few hours earlier when Edwin arrived at the Circelian estate. Edwin is standing in the garden with a bouquet and 2 notes, which makes him feel like a bachelor courting a young lady. And he can even imagine his friend Daniel's face if he saw him like this. He lets out a frustrated sigh. All he needs to do is tell Alicia the news about the saint, so he doesn't understand why he is making such a fuss. After all, he is a man of the goddess and should be different from others. But there he is, watching the play. The priest remains indifferent to it. He finds the play poorly made and the acting questionable. He only bought the ticket after hearing it was about a saint, but apparently that wasn't a good idea. Well, at least it sets the tone for the conversation they will have. But it seems to have affected Alicia a little. As they leave, they hear 2 men talking, saying it was only worth it because of the actress's pleasant face, and that she had even gone through a divine evaluation. This becomes a joke among them. They say that acting is one thing, especially if someone is pretty, can sing, and act a little, but otherwise they dismiss the girl. One of them says that hearing people applaud every night can go to someone's head, but not every place will have a stage. Hearing this, Alicia is not going to let it go. So she goes to the actress, placing her own hat on her, and says that people are fools but only jealous because they know she is out of their league. She tells the girl, all they can do is judge a book by its cover, because they have no idea that her very essence is present in every look, breath, and movement she makes. With a beautiful smile, she says she wishes to watch the actress perform again and hopes she continues pursuing it. The girl becomes very shy with so many beautiful words. Meanwhile, Edwin watches their interaction, unable to hold back a smile. Soon, Alicia returns, apologizing for making him wait, but the only thing the priest wants to know is how the conversation went. So she tells him everything she said. Touching his hair, the priest asks how she intends to hide it without the hat. Then the girl realizes this worrying detail, but she says she doesn't need to, no more than the actress did. And Edwin comments that she speaks like a true Vestal. Alicia asks him not to joke, but the priest surprises her by saying she is right, because if it is within one's reach to provide support for another person, then one must do so. And for a moment, he had forgotten the basic attitude expected of a member of the clergy. This somehow irritates him regarding his own feelings. But the young man doesn't want to talk about that now and asks her to forget the topic. At the pastry shop, Alicia says she is ready to listen, having noticed that the man held this in all day waiting for the right moment. As always suspicious, Edwin takes extra care to see if there is anyone suspicious around them. While pretending to only be drinking tea, he reveals that a saint has been selected. Not one of the pre-selected candidates, but the second daughter of Count Malaire. According to his investigations, it is Abigail. Hearing this, Alicia only regrets not having considered this outcome. After all, if it wasn't going to be her, one way or another, it would have to be someone else. And in this case, her cousin. To her, it is her fault. if she had remembered the girl much earlier and taken her somewhere safer, and this even makes her consider whether she could become a saint again. But then, in her mind, the image of the last time she saw her father appears, and that she cannot do again. After all, choosing not to become a saint was not something she did thinking only of herself. To escape this nightmare for a moment, Alicia changes the subject and asks about the earlier performance. Edwin found it quite interesting and very brave of them to address a religious theme given the current atmosphere, calling that the best part. The story is about a girl who fought for the enemy after receiving a calling from the gods, only to be labeled a witch and executed. This could be a parallel both to Joan of Arc and to Alicia herself. In the play, the protagonist was honorable and virtuous until her last breath. Even when called a witch, her faith never wavered. That was the part that touched the Vestal the most, because she was not like that. She believes that's why she turned into one, having felt so much anger when they labeled her, and then was taken to the stake. Deep down, she can understand it a little better now. Thus, she reveals that she took her own flesh and blood to the most dangerous place in the Empire for her own safety, and that is why she is a witch. Edwin tries to stop her from blaming herself, but Alicia continues, saying that that title was enough for everyone. Therefore, she will also be one in this timeline. The priest has a sad look. He even considers comforting her in this moment, but ends up giving up halfway. Edwin has more updates to share, which may be good or bad. The next night, the church will receive a debutante presentation for Lady Malaire. This makes her realize that her cousin is going through everything she went through, and they are probably setting up a luxurious stage for the saint and the crown prince to naturally meet. Another thing she knows is that Abigail will serve as a wonderful ornament, while Victor wants a romantic first meeting that will help him in his claim to the throne. Because of this, Alicia's desire is to meet her cousin. But that is not something Edwin can arrange immediately. Since they haven't seen each other since they were children, the Vestal believes Abigail does not remember her appearance. Even so, she has no intention of letting her fall into the hands of the cruel prince, so it is useful to establish contact now, even if she is terrified of seeing Prelate Labentius and Victor. Alicia decides that she will be the debutante. She made a grand proclamation without a specific objective in mind, yet she wonders what the true reason is for wanting to meet Abigail. And the answer is probably to feel better about herself. The blonde can't help it and hates herself for being this way. Noticing she is very quiet, Edwin asks what is on her mind while offering the sweets she asked for because she hadn't eaten in a while. The priest pushes them onto her plate with the excuse that he can't take them back to the monastery. Even as the leader there, he can't get anything like this in Arkelio, even if she asked for it. So he suggests she eat as much as she wants. But what should have been a kind gesture ends up being a trigger. Alicia remembers that voice saying, "I'll make sure you get as much as you want until you're completely satisfied." Once, Victor said he was capable of doing that. For the saint, just hearing that coming from him is enough. But feeling hurt, the heir declared he had searched through every candy shop, and that he would give her everything the Empire had to offer. Then the scene changes and Sua begins receiving what once belonged to the blonde. This was reason enough for the witch to taunt her, asking if there was something about her husband giving sweets every day, and that it surely had been done for her as well since everyone knows what kind of man the prince is. Alicia denies it, making the Empress laugh for defending him even after everything. Sua is cruel in many ways, including with words, so she asks Alicia how it feels not to be loved and adored by others anymore. She slams her dessert while ranting that she is dying to know, wishing for the blonde to be more hated and miserable, because she is there to witness her worst moment. The Empress says she is nothing more than a disposable toy for Victor, being a false saint and now a lying witch who deceived an entire empire, and declares that the blonde should pay for her sins for the rest of her life while writhing and agonizing in pain. Alicia doesn't understand why she is thinking about this. Edwin ends the silence by saying she is showing her true colors as a noble, asking whether she forgot how to eat after leaving the monastery. Alicia was surprised for not noticing that, while she was lost in her thoughts, the priest had handed her the dessert. Edwin takes a piece of the sweet and pushes it toward her. Already out of patience, he asks what she is waiting for and complains that she doesn't notice he is trying to be affectionate with a member of the monastery, even shy. In the end, Alicia ends up accepting that generous piece. Then the priest asks what it tastes like. The blonde finds it a little too sweet, which makes her unable to feel the tip of her tongue. Edwin had thought she liked that kind of thing since the girl asked for it so much. Thinking carefully, the blonde never actually liked sweets. In a way, it's a good thing since she won't be able to have such things in a monastery anyway. But at least, in a strange way, Alicia feels a little better. Edwin returns to the subject of her thinking she is a witch. To him, Alicia is too naive to be one, since she clearly has her own opinions about being punished. And he immediately uses as an example the fact that even when being scolded, the blonde can barely say a word. So how could she be wicked? It makes no sense. After all, if a woman with the courage to give away her own hat to protect another is a witch, he questions what someone with a vasara and vital fluid on their hands should be called, thus being certain that someone out there would be willing to protect her in the same way. Finally, Alicia is back at her mansion. Noticing the dinner table set, the girl says it wasn't necessary for them to wait for her. Either way, her father says he can warm the food. Theodore, like any other father, only relaxed when his only daughter was out there, doing who knows what with a tall gentleman from the monastery, which he imagined to be safer. Alicia says not to worry since he is just a kind man who cares, and that anyway he came to share an update about the saint selection. She tells him that the church is organizing a last-minute debutante ball for the next day. The man also finds it strange since that usually happens at the end of autumn and already imagines the reason behind it. This is the moment the Vestal reveals that Abigail is the new saint, and that this was probably planned as soon as they found out about the Malaire girl. Since they are the same age, she knows Abigail still wouldn't have been introduced to society. With a tired sigh, Theodore understands that everything is happening exactly as they want. Alicia says that it's not too late to take action. Even if she can't prevent Abigail from becoming a saint, she can still help her get out of it. So she tells him her intention to participate in the debutante ball. She asks if it's too late to join, but to Theodore the only problem would be the preparations. Since there is no way to convince her otherwise, the Duke agrees to help, also knowing that Izzy will be the one truly happy about it. Certainly, the woman will freak out because he will be presenting his only daughter to society with just one day of preparation, and she'll want to buy dresses, shoes, and jewelry immediately. But there's nothing they can do, and there is something else the father wants to give her, which makes her curious. In any case, the Duke would like to celebrate her coming of age. Alicia immediately remembers the emerald necklace her father gifted her in that life, but Labentius forced her to wear another. So if it really is that, she doesn't know what she will do since she can't wear it in the monastery. She follows her father in silence, until she notices they are going to her mother's room. It is the place where he keeps everything that belonged to Helena because looking at any trace of her hurt too deeply. But there is one thing he couldn't store away. Alicia doesn't know what it could be, until her eyes shine upon seeing the beautiful dress. Theodore looks at it with great admiration. Helena wore it at her debutante ball, being the most beautiful woman at the event, and she spoke to him, making him feel like he was in a beautiful dream. The Count says he is curious to see how his daughter will look in it. Since it is out of fashion, the father asks what she thinks, but Alicia is completely emotional. She touches the dress gently, thinking it is a wonderful gift, and promises she will have a lot of fun. Edwin is in a carriage. As he admires the scenery, he ends up remembering the moment he was with the Vestal. At that moment, the priest said he had the impression she had no plan for this, and his instinct was indeed correct. But Alicia wasn't considering the idea of being a guest at the ball, nor had she thought of her appearance. And also it had not been announced that Lady Sorcellian was a nun. Theodore kept this a secret to avoid any suspicion related to the saint selection. Edwin makes it clear that the Pantheon is keeping an eye on her. He also says that even if the goal of attending the ball is to force a meeting with Abigail, she will still have Labentius, who will stay close to the saint the entire time. The priest says something the blonde agrees with, that he is sure she wouldn't want to go and attract unwanted attention because she doesn't have a partner, but she considers Jaren for that. For Alicia, it's a good option since she has known him since childhood. However, Edwin surprises her by saying that as the leader of the Arkelio clergy members, he cannot allow it. He says that as a Vestal, she has vowed to dedicate her life to the goddess, so he asks if she thinks it is acceptable to be accompanied by a young man whose ill intentions are so obvious, and Alicia, who doesn't really understand the sermon, just complains that he was the one who suggested she find a partner in the first place. The priest wants to drop the subject since these are unusual circumstances. Therefore, he intends to be her escort at the ball. Alicia is caught off guard, unable to believe it is really him, and Edwin asks who else she thought she would go with. The girl, even stammering, denies having anyone else, so the priest schedules to pick her up the next day. He then says goodbye with that promise. Now in the carriage, he regrets having done something foolish again. Being clergy means leaving behind any life one once had, to dedicate oneself to the goddess entirely. Ever since Edwin completed his divinity training, worldly things stopped making sense. And this time, he volunteered to return to a world that makes him dizzy, finding it ridiculous. He is received by Isadora, who won't stop talking about how relieved she is that he will be the one escorting Lady Sorcellian to the ball, especially that one who is always such a troublemaker. Before she says anything else, Alicia appears, asking her not to embarrass her in front of His Eminence. Besides the suffering she endured with the lady helping her get ready, shouting for everyone around her to grab dresses and jewelry, and complaining that the girl's hair, which used to be so silky, was now in a pitiful state. But Izzy defends herself, saying that the lady certainly didn't plan on showing up to the ball looking the way she had been. Without any patience left, Edwin interrupts them, saying they should leave. Alicia, who had been too distracted with Isadora, hadn't heard what he said and asks him to repeat it. For some reason, something freezes the priest. He quickly regains his composure and says they must not be late. After all, Alicia is already ready to go. Edwin approaches and asks how it feels to be on her way to get revenge on her tormentors. Quite curious for a priest to think about this kind of sentiment. At least the blonde feels absolutely wonderful about it. With a smile, Edwin takes her hand, since they have no time to waste. As expected, the ball is filled with well-dressed figures. His Eminence leaves her as soon as they arrive, claiming he needs a minute because he is allergic to these kinds of social gatherings. Alicia even wonders if the man is well known in these circles. Meanwhile, as expected, she becomes the center of attention, with people whispering about her sudden appearance after being sick for so long, and even gossiping about the tacky dress she is wearing, but the girl doesn't care about their opinions. One way or another, it is exactly what she wants, for she has become a mere supporting character in this story. Suddenly, the subject changes. When they notice Lady Malaire next to the prelate, they already assume she is the chosen saint. Everyone begins congratulating her for the great blessing, oblivious to the terrified girl. With his fake smile, Labentius tells them to continue on, as there is much to do tonight. It doesn't take long before the arrival of the crown prince is announced. He arrives in high spirits, asking if they are enjoying the ball. And so the two protagonists meet. The only ones who know the ending of this performance are those who planned it, and she, the secondary character. And this time she refuses to let these two take control of the narrative. The ball continues lively, each pair dancing. Parallel conversations also happen, such as rumors that Viscount Paul made breakthroughs somewhere west of the Empire. The daughter of Raelianaga also becomes a topic. Meanwhile, Alicia remains alone, observing everything happening around her, until someone approaches, saying she looks bored. Finally, Edwin is back. Worried, the girl asks if everything is okay, and he assures her it is. But the priest wants to know why she isn't dancing. Alicia makes it clear that she didn't come for that, which makes the platinum-haired man happy, since he hates these kinds of things. Alicia noticed that apparently several people recognized him there and asks if he is sure he doesn't need to greet them. Laughing, she says she had no idea how famous he was. She also realizes that despite talking so much, they never actually touched upon who the priest really is. Edwin answers right away that there isn't much to say, as he is merely a member of the clergy of the Archelio monastery. So it doesn't matter what life he had before. He is a servant of the goddess, and that is the only thing that matters. The man says the same applies to her, making it clear that this is not a place for the two of them. Looking at it that way, Alicia agrees that he's right. Suddenly, a song begins to play and catches the girl's attention. She danced a lot to this one when she was a saint. Noticing the priest standing up, the blonde asks if he's going to the ballroom. The platinum-haired man says no because he intends to ask her to grant him this dance, catching the blonde completely by surprise. Edwin says once again that it doesn't matter what her past was like, only how she will live in the present. He comments that he has noticed the girl's tendency to have painful memories from her past life and understands that humans often fixate on dark memories, but he is certain that difficult memories can be replaced by new ones. With a small smile, Alicia agrees. Very happily, Cercelian says that it is as simple as dancing with him and creating a new memory, and she doesn't need to think too much. Then she makes the request, "Would you grant me this dance, Father Edwin?" The beautiful couple goes to the dance floor, their steps guided by the orchestra's fine melody. It has been so long since Alicia last danced freely, and with him she can always feel that way. And if she thinks about it, she realizes it wasn't only once. Like that day when the platinum-haired man said he couldn't help her get sweets in the Archelio monastery. The priest is always trying to free her from the past. Secretly, Alicia wonders why he keeps trying. Realizing how well he dances, the blonde is curious about where he learned. Then comments around them catch her attention. People saying how perfect the prince and the saint look together, even imagining them married. Edwin comments that this was the perfect moment for everyone to take notice, realizing Victor is even more cunning than he expected. One cannot expect little from someone who did everything possible to take the throne from his father. Sensing that this might affect the girl, the priest asks if she wants to take a break, but she refuses. After all, she needed to witness this moment with her own eyes. In fact, Alicia wants to thank the prince for this, for reminding her once again what her goal is. Even after the dance has ended, it was so magnificent that people are still commenting on it. Victor gives attention to everyone who continues praising him, completely ignoring the saint. This is when Abigail takes the chance to slip away, something Alicia doesn't miss, and she will take the opportunity to speak with her. Alicia follows her cousin's path. Even without being told anything, she once walked that same way and knows that the second floor is the ballroom, and the third is the terrace in the west wing, a quiet place with almost no one around. That is where Abigail will be waiting for Victor, who will never appear. The prince had whispered in her ear about the place he goes to when tired of all the flattery and made it clear that he would go. Alicia knows the words spoken and that they would have felt like a lifeline in such a vast and lonely hall. A trap set by him, and all she had to do was wait for Alicia to fall into it. And now, thinking about it, she believes he must have found it very amusing to see her walk in dancing into a cold cell when she thought a warm home awaited on the other side. That is why she will not let Abigail face the same thing, because it was already more than enough that they had their fun with her. Alicia apologizes to her cousin, saying she didn't know the place was occupied. The saint quickly tries to hide her tears and says she had just come in, and her intention is to return to the party before saying something she may regret. Her cousin is about to leave when the nun says she wouldn't mind having her company there, claiming she sort of ran away with her, which makes the other girl stop. Alicia tries to draw her in, saying one needs a place to go to when tired of so much flattery. And by coincidence, that place is perfect for that. And, well, that makes the saint wonder who this girl who won't stop talking even is. Abigail tries to ask something but stops, curious how this stranger knows about the prince's secret spot. She suspects there's something more behind it. She also notices the strong resemblance between them. Sensing the discomfort, Alicia reassures her, saying she only wants to talk. Holding her hand, she says that it should be a glorious day for her as the future saint, so there must certainly be a reason for those tears. Gently, the nun asks if she wants to talk about it, but she ends up leaving Abigail a bit alarmed about whether she should really tell her. Ever since she stepped into that ballroom, it felt like she was at war, with nobles fighting for her attention, wanting to start conversations, making it impossible to tell who was a friend or an enemy. However, there is this girl who looks so much like her, who also has golden hair and cerulean eyes, and who might understand how strange the divine evaluation was. Feeling a bit of trust, Abigail reveals that she may not be a true saint, having no divine power, no ability to prophesy, and not even to heal. She says she has never encountered the great powerful goddess, so she simply doesn't understand how she ended up there. Abigail says that since Alicia has the same traits, she wants to know how she managed to avoid the divine evaluation, and also questions the Pantheon's actions. With a sad and distant look, Alicia says they don't care about whether she has divine powers. The saint, surprised, asks how she knows these things so precisely. Alicia reveals that she is only there to meet her. Naturally, the other girl wants to know the reason for that, so the nun says she is there to turn her into a true saint. But the girl steps back and asks if she didn't hear anything she said. After all, she clearly stated she has no abilities, no way to become a real saint, and Alicia says they only need to pretend. It is something the Pantheon can easily do and claim it was her. More confident, Alicia approaches and says, "When I say I will turn you into one, I don't mean I will help you gain real powers," and asks her to think carefully about it. She says what she needs is power and influence. Alicia makes the saint question who will benefit the most if she ends up marrying the prince. It doesn't take much for Abigail to understand that becoming a saint and a princess will allow Victor to use the prophecy as a weapon to assert himself as the first in the line of succession to the throne. The nun reassures her, saying she understands how frightening it must be for a stranger to appear, claiming she wants to help her become a saint while also telling her to keep an eye on the prince. But there, Alicia swears she will be her source of strength, being her hands and feet so she can stand firm on her own as the Empire's saint, no matter how. And it's truly incredible to see everything the protagonist does so that no one else goes through her suffering. Finally, she suggests they return, saying that even though it is spring, the cold won't help. And besides, Laurentius must be looking for her. For her, it was already enough for the day, since she understands her cousin needs to experience this journey herself before she can understand anything Alicia has to say. Before leaving, Abigail calls out to her because there's something she's still curious about. She wants to know who the stranger is, and also why she wants to help and how she knows everything that's happening. Saying things as if she had lived through them, Alicia simply says that time will reveal the answers, since she already promised to be her hands and feet. The nun asks her to stay attentive to His Highness after the inauguration of the sainthood, because she will meet her again when the prince's foundation begins to falter. She returns to Edwin, who asks how the meeting went, so the girl says it went well, but her concern is whether she made him wait again. Alicia sits beside him and calls for him, asking if he would hear her confession when they return to the monastery, because she believes she acted dishonorably by deceiving someone, and he is surprised a nun would ask such a thing. After all, it is his job to do that, to guide sinful souls to the goddess's feet. Therefore, he makes it clear that she may use him for that however she needs, if it helps ease the burden on her shoulders. Edwin declares that he will gladly take care of her soul as a servant of the great lady, and finally softens the tone, saying, "It may be spring, but the winds are still sharp, aren't they?" With her mission complete, the girl returns home, and soon her father wants details of how everything went. Alicia is surprised he waited for her, but he wouldn't stop worrying about her at the ball. The girl tells her father not to act silly. At that moment, the butler appears, saying that despite acting playful now, the man was dying of worry. Brian reveals that his lord tried several times to sneak out and go to the party, and he barely managed to convince him to sit in the office and stay there until she returned. Theodore laughs awkwardly, saying he has noticed the butler has been talking too much lately, causing some bickering between the two men as the butler also mentions hearing his heavy footsteps keeping everyone on the estate awake. And it all ends with Brian being sent home. Alicia laughs at the small situation and at her father worrying so much. Theodore says things will be calm there again once she returns to the monastery. The girl sadly promises that she will write often, and he was obviously ready to pull her ear and say she doesn't write frequently, asking her to double her efforts. And of course, he asks her to stay healthy and safe. The vacation passes too quickly, and soon the two lovebirds are returning to the monastery. Edwin finds it very ironic that the blonde is complaining about it, since she took an entire week off as soon as she became a Vestal, while this has been his first in years. The girl apologizes for that. Changing the subject, the platinum-haired man finds it strange that Abigail didn't recognize her, so Alicia explains that her cousin went to study abroad when she was still young, and since then they haven't spoken, and it probably happened the same way, not remembering when the madness of the divine evaluation came. Finally, the carriage stops, announcing their arrival, but the priest immediately notices something is wrong and quickly opens the door, wanting to know what that noise is outside. What he finds is the nuns and Father Daniel suffering at the hands of children who are tormenting them while playing. The scene is shocking for the newcomers. In panic, Daniel explains that he tried everything to refuse, but that it wasn't a choice. It was a direct order. Edwin has barely arrived and already has a lot to handle, while Alicia helps calm Sarah down with a bit of water. The platinum-haired man asks whether the Central Pantheon sent all the orphans under their care. Sarah confirms, saying it happened as soon as he left, and the Pantheon claimed they no longer had capacity for them and sent them there. Edwin gets irritated, since this situation happened because Father Marco isn't in condition to take charge, and Daniel is still young, so he couldn't say anything. The sister says they received 42 children, and that, counting the ones already there, the total is 60. She tells him that for the past week they've been sleeping in the library because it was the warmest place they could think of. Edwin orders the storerooms to be emptied so they can be reused to create appropriate spaces for the children, and this task falls to Daniel. With them back, Sarah feels relieved that things are finally being resolved. All of this makes Alicia feel guilty. She says the girl has been working so hard and that if she had known what was happening, she would have returned sooner. But the sister is fine with it, since Alicia was thinking about her father, and she's happy she managed to rest. Edwin calls everyone's attention, saying that until they can send the children back to the Pantheon or to another monastery, they will remain under their care. Then he asks if there's enough food, but that's the current problem. The kitchen is completely empty. Alicia is shocked by the situation, since there were supplies stacked all the way to the ceiling before they left, and if she thinks about it, they weren't even gone that long. Edwin, however, isn't surprised, since suddenly there are twice as many mouths to feed. Sarah laments the situation, saying she should have foreseen it, but he understands she must have had a lot of work caring for the children. The priest is truly worried about how they will feed them. Anything will have to do, even a thin soup. Hearing this, Alicia volunteers, mentioning a recipe she learned at the Imperial Monastery. Since they were always in this kind of situation there, because they weren't funded by the Central Pantheon, they operated self-sufficiently, meaning fewer ingredients in most meals. Edwin asks if she can handle it. Excited, the blonde accepts the mission. Meanwhile, he will take care of the children, which surprises her. He defends himself, saying he gets along very well with children, though Alicia secretly thinks he actually just scares those poor kids. The leader of Archelio orders everyone to start moving since time is essential. Sarah is responsible for helping in the kitchen. Poor Daniel is suffering with the cleaning, and the priest ends up becoming the center of curiosity for the little ones. Alicia is calm, having gathered enough ingredients. On the way back to the kitchen, something catches her attention. Someone is singing, and she assumes it must be the choir practicing. Peeking inside, she discovers the one conducting them is Edwin. He is teaching the children. This discovery is both impressive and charming to her, but she quickly remembers that every pair of hands is needed elsewhere. At least this proves the priest wasn't lying when he said he's good with children. Night is already at its deepest point. Finally, Alicia can sit down to rest. She never imagined taking care of children could be so exhausting. A voice surprises her, saying she did a good job. It's Father Edwin, and she only found it strange because the man has lost his voice after severely underestimating the children's energy. Alicia praises him, saying the children seem to like his company very much, but the platinum-haired man had already made it clear that he gets along well with them. Being a member of the clergy, he should at least be capable of that. Suddenly, Edwin says that they are finally alone, which startles the girl, but it's to discuss what she plans to do regarding Abigail, and in a strange way, she agrees. Alicia starts by asking about His Majesty's health. The priest finds that odd, so she has to explain that in her other life, the Emperor's health began deteriorating rapidly around this time. Edwin understands that the girl is implying someone caused that on purpose, not to mention she seems a bit unsure. He encourages her to continue, wanting to know what this has to do with Abigail. Alicia explains that Labentius won't sit still and watch it happen. He will use His Majesty's health as an excuse to keep the saint glued to the Emperor's side day after day for Mass as a strategy to look good. Edwin understands that the Mass for such an occasion will be difficult for the Pantheon to lead alone, and she adds that help will be requested from the other monasteries. The man immediately understands what she means, because that is exactly what the nun is hoping for. The only way for either of them to enter the palace as members of the clergy, all she needs is to be assigned as lectorate. She has heard there are precedents for a nun receiving such a position, and if she can participate in the Mass in Father Marco's place, since he struggles to walk, that way she can also communicate with Abigail more easily. Alicia says she knows fragments of what will happen from now on, and if she can help her cousin up close, it's possible to make others believe she is a true saint. Thus, people won't be able to accuse her of being a witch later. Touching the priest's hand, the girl asks if he can help her. Edwin quickly pulls away, giving a sermon that it is a very serious sin for a clergyman to have any physical contact with a woman or a child. Pulling himself together, he explains he must remain without sin, and would appreciate it if she refrained from any unnecessary physical contact. Alicia apologizes for the mistake, realizing the priest becomes very strict and sanctified in moments like this. Going deeper into the matter, Edwin says he understands what she's trying to say, and will see what he can do about it. A brief silence settles between them, until the priest breaks it, asking if she remembers that on the night of the ball she had something she wanted to confess. Alicia remembers it, but with everything happening, she completely forgot, and now it's too late. The priest says he plans to stop by the Central Pantheon the next day to check how things are going. Approaching her, he says he might have time to listen when he returns and asks if she will be available. Nervous from the closeness, Alicia is the one who steps back this time and agrees. They were only talking about confession, yet the nun doesn't understand why her heart is beating so fast. In Labentius's presence, the man says he hopes the trip there wasn't difficult, especially so early. Edwin only thinks this old man is becoming more senile, but what he actually replies is that it was far from a walk in the park. Then he goes straight to the point, saying the number of mouths to feed in the monastery has suddenly increased, wanting the old man to explain how that happened. Labentius is an astute man despite everything. Acting clueless, he asks what he means by that, but Edwin doesn't fall for it and says there is no way he doesn't know, asking if he hasn't noticed how the Pantheon is quieter than usual. Labentius begins by saying the place is a sacred space of worship for the great goddess, and of course things should be as peaceful as they always were, but Edwin has no patience for jokes. He immediately asks why he sent those children to his monastery, arguing that Archelio has no space or resources, having to house them in a library for lack of a proper place, and not even having funds to feed them properly. Labentius says he can help with the financial issue, but that is not what the platinum-haired man asked. The prelate reveals that early the next morning they will announce the saint, and they cannot leave her without instruction before being taken to the palace, and that everyone there is being positively bombarded with work. Edwin asks if that's why he sent 42 children away just to educate a saint, and asks what is wrong with her. The old man even feels offended by the question. He starts with his usual talk of belittling the platinum-haired man, saying he still has a long way to go because he has no idea of the crucial role she will play, saying it is time to understand what it truly means to be a saint. And that is when Edwin realizes the old man is different. Labentius then says, "The saint is simply a scapegoat for our goal." The man asks him to think about what it means to be a deity, being invisible to human eyes and not even interfering in their affairs and to the rest of the people, nothing more than an illusion. This makes the priest wonder how a member of the clergy can say something like that. Labentius says that humans are weak, and when someone comes and says they will take away their sins and pain, they will believe it, even if it's false. A divine being who will judge everyone equally, who has the power to forgive, and who will remove all pain and agony. A being far better than any human in this world. Someone who will make everyone kneel to confess and ask for forgiveness. And that is when the church steps in to offer forgiveness in the name of the goddess, who had mercy on everyone's fragility and sent a saint to be the sacrifice. Edwin finds this absurd, but the prelate simply says he hopes this helps him understand the importance of the saint. The priest is back at Archelio. Edwin is furious at Labentius, who finally showed his true face and thinks about what he should do regarding what he heard. But he can't act at this exact moment because it's announced that someone is there to confess. He doesn't even need to hear the name to know who it is. Alicia soon enters the confessional. The priest begins with, "May the Celestial Mother be in your heart and help you confess your sins with true repentance." And afterward, what stretches out is a long silence. Edwin notices the girl is hesitating. He already has so many worries after that visit, so he has no idea what might be affecting her. With no patience left, he calls her name, but it's someone else who is there to ask forgiveness for his sin. It's a man who reveals he has hurt the delicate hearts of two women and deserves to be thrown into the pits of hell to burn for eternity. The priest turns, tense, because it isn't Alicia there. Then the stranger continues, saying he has regretted his actions and, once he regained his senses, made sure to apologize to his wife. He asks if there is any hope for him to be forgiven. Edwin does his duty and says that according to the sacred scriptures, there is no sin that cannot be brought to the feet of the great goddess and forgiven. That is how it is written. Rather than begging for forgiveness at the foot of a grave, they must do so before the eternal goddess. That doctrine allowed countless believers to sin and then come begging for forgiveness at the monastery. Thinking about this irritates the priest, since it's funny how sins are committed among humans, but they seek forgiveness from a divine being. In the end, Labentius is right. The man asks about his sentence, and Edwin says that when one looks closely, the verse is actually just a metaphor, and the real answer lies with the goddess and only with her. This confuses the man, who asks if he wasn't told he could be forgiven by presenting himself before the Great Mother. With no patience, Edwin asks, "Do you simply seek the rigid, literal interpretation of the words?" And he continues the sermon. The goddess most despised her disciples who committed adultery, and they were ordered to drink caustic soda and repent for their actions. The man stands up in fear, and the priest asks if he is so terrified of paying the fair price for his sins. And judging by the visit, he assumes the man apologized to his wife but did not receive forgiveness. Edwin shouts that only he is responsible for the sins he committed, and should not expect anyone to pay the price in his place or sacrifice themselves for him. Those harsh words make the man cry even more. The priest advises that before asking forgiveness from the great goddess, he should return to the person he mistreated and apologize sincerely, and that this concludes the confession. Immediately after that flood of words, Edwin leaves the confessional and comes face to face with Alicia, who rushes toward him. He asks if she is there to confess. With a trembling voice, the girl confirms it, but says she suddenly remembered an urgent matter she must handle and needs to leave. This genuinely surprises the platinum-haired priest, as he tries to understand why she is acting this way. Alicia is fighting desperately not to cry in front of him. So, to escape that, she ends up running away. In her mind are the words he said about being responsible for one's own sins, and it makes her think he is right, because confession isn't enough, and what she tried to do was nothing more than shallow self-pity. Alicia had listened to the entire sermon, and it made her feel as if the words were almost being directed at her, which filled her with deep shame. Distracted, the girl only realizes she was followed when the priest tells her to wait. He ignores her request to let go, only wanting to know what the problem is. Worried, he asks if something happened while he was away. Without looking up, Alicia denies it, saying she has something very urgent to take care of. Edwin demands that she at least look at him while saying that because it seems something is bothering her. And his thought is, who is this girl to leave you this shaken? In the end, he is surprised by how she looks. Quickly, Alicia tries to wipe her tears, saying it's nothing and that she will make her confession another time. Then she pulls away from him. The nun even ignores the priest calling after her. With her distancing, Edwin remembers he had asked her to stop making any unnecessary physical contact, and yet he didn't think twice before grabbing her by the arm. But seeing her upset made him act on instinct. That's not something he usually does. Ever since he realized it wasn't her on the other side of the confessional, he has been acting purely on emotion. Perhaps the priest has been aware of this much longer than he realized. Edwin goes after her and reaches her, immediately asking if she is angry because of what was said in the confessional, if that is why she is running away like that. As soon as she stops, Alicia turns toward him, already kissing him. Before he can say anything, the girl stops him and says, "You said it was a sin for a man of the goddess to touch a woman." Edwin then wraps his arms around her, saying that none of that matters anymore, and asks her not to run from him. Confident, Alicia asks if that means she can take off his sacred white clothes, and soon they are both free of their garments while the girl says, "You're impure, father." But it was all nothing more than a terrible nightmare. Edwin sits up in bed, startled and breathless. He quickly fills a cup with water and drinks as if he had spent an eternity in the desert. His situation worsens, because the girl is now appearing in his dreams as well, believing that perhaps he has lost his mind. Another day arrives, and the sister is excited to go to the festival, something Alicia has no idea about. This is because the entire empire is celebrating after the announcement of the saint, and Sarah is eager to enjoy it. Alicia wonders if she really deserves it. After all, at this very moment her cousin is wearing the saint's robes in her place and is probably suffering humiliation and pain. So she answers that she thinks it's better to stay and clean, but the redhead tries to convince her, saying the other sisters will leave early in the morning, which means they can go in the afternoon. But if Circilian remembers correctly, the others are going to a formal duty, and that doesn't stop Sarah, who says they will do the same. The redhead says everyone is planning to relax. However, Alicia is distracted, thinking she needs to buy some things at the market, and after what happened last night, she is far too embarrassed to face the priest. so she thinks leaving is the best option. Then she says that if she manages to finish the cleaning before the afternoon, she will go, which excites the redhead. Sarah wants to hurry everything to leave as soon as possible. While working, the sister asks Alicia about her noble lineage and whether she met the saint before. The blonde confirms it, giving the sister the opening to ask what she is like and whether she really looks like an angel. If Labentius could create his ideal saint, she would be exactly like Abigail, and just like Alicia herself in the past. But the only reply Alicia gives is that her cousin is good. Sarah asks if the two are acquaintances or friends, feeling jealous of it, but Alicia lies, saying they only spoke twice, saying she is much closer to Sarah than to the saint since the two of them talk, clean rooms together, and will soon go to the festival. The redhead promises they will eat well when they go. However, upon arriving there, Sarah is shocked by what she holds in her hands. She complains that they raised the festival prices to almost double what they were before. At least the potato is really tasty, even if it's not much different from the ones at the monastery. Excited, Sarah says maybe it tastes better because they are sharing it. Alicia smiles and agrees. Suddenly, the redhead asks if she is okay, catching the blonde off guard. Sarah says she was worried because Alicia seemed very down this morning, so she wondered if the outing had changed that. Alicia is surprised that the sister suggested going to the festival because she was worried about her. She says she feels much better and thanks her for it, and the redhead says that staying inside the monastery all the time can make them feel suffocated. That's why Sarah says they should go on outings like this more often. The two girls run together, excited. As they walk side by side, they talk more about how the day had been fun for both of them, unable to remember the last time they enjoyed themselves this much. Sarah admits she's happy her friend arrived at the monastery and even prayed that they would grow closer and spend time together like this, just as Alicia is grateful for the same. Only now do they realize it's almost nightfall, so they need to hurry back. Alicia gets distracted looking at the list of things they still need to pick up, so she doesn't notice a carriage approaching at high speed. Sarah runs to her in time to push her out of the way. The blonde falls to the ground but out of danger. As soon as she recovers, she looks for her friend. She catches a glimpse of Prince Victor inside the carriage, and he doesn't seem concerned about the victims at all. But she has no time to fear him, because her friend is lying unconscious on the ground. Alicia runs to her and notices she's losing a large amount of her vital fluid. This leaves her desperate, not knowing what to do. She screams for someone nearby to help. Her desperation only grows, even as more people gather. But when they realize it was an accident caused by a noble's carriage, they don't want to get involved. One of the soldiers even informs Victor about the accident, but the bastard doesn't care. Meanwhile, Alicia, kneeling by her friend's side, believes it's her fault. After all, not even her father escaped. She starts crying, lamenting over her friend and for having failed her. People only stare, as if it were a spectacle, and amid all this, someone calls her name. It's the priest, appearing worried about the girls. Before that, Edwin had received information that they had gone out. Daniel told him the two said they needed to buy some things in town, but even he knows the whole empire is in an uproar over the news of the saint, and the sisters are going out to witness it. Edwin stands up, immediately saying he needs to go to the city as well. After all, if they're shopping at the market, there's no way two sisters can carry everything alone, completely ignoring Daniel asking about the work he still has to do. Once again, he acted differently from what he should, and this time it may save a life. He had no idea something like this could happen. Alicia sees the priest and stammers, asking what she should do, insisting it's all her fault. Edwin tries to calm her, saying he will find a doctor for Sarah immediately. Worried, he asks how she is. Since she has only a scratch, he asks if she can run back to the monastery and inform everyone about what happened. And that's what she does. Back at the monastery, the girl waits until she notices Edwin's presence. He asks if she was waiting there the whole time. Saying that wasn't her intention, Alicia bombards him with questions, wanting to know Sarah's condition. Luckily, she's alive, but still unconscious. However, her leg was severely injured, and even if she wakes up, it's highly likely she won't be able to use it again. Alicia's eyes fill with tears once more, saying it's her fault, lamenting that she didn't pay attention. Edwin tries to reassure her, saying that witnesses said it was an unfortunate accident and there's no way it could be her fault. Even hearing that, Alicia can't avoid breaking down in tears. Sarah soon woke up, but just as the priest said, she could no longer walk and was ordered to return home. Alicia saw her friend when she left the doctor. However, she couldn't say anything, not even an apology or a comforting word. On the other hand, it was Sarah who asked why she looked so sad. Alicia then managed to apologize, once again blaming herself for what happened. Then the redhead explains that while she was unconscious, she had a long dream where she was trapped in darkness, and then she heard Alicia's voice calling her from somewhere. That almost angelic voice calling her, and saying it was time to wake up. When she followed that voice, she was guided toward the light, and that was how she escaped that place and returned to the world. Sarah asks if saying she only woke up because of her would alarm her. Well, either way, she insists. That's how it happened. The redhead says she holds no resentment at all and is relieved that Alicia is okay. And so the girl left, still with her strong faith. Returning to the present, Edwin asks if she had a good conversation with Sarah. She thanks him for his concern and for having rescued them that day. And the priest modestly says he only fulfilled his administrative responsibilities. Even so, Alicia thanks him because she had been terrified that day and thought no one would help. Then the priest says they were probably ignored because the carriage that caused the accident belonged to nobility. Finally thinking about it, Alicia remembers having seen Victor. Even though she couldn't follow him in the chaos, she is sure it was him. However, she doesn't understand what he was doing there and wonders if it might be another plan. And if it's Sua, the problem is that, based on her previous timeline, it's still too early for the witch to appear. She also wonders if someone must be sacrificed in order for her to avoid her fate. If that's the case, it means she really is guilty for what happened to Sarah. Edwin calls her attention, saying he knows she's having negative thoughts again, while the nun apologizes for having gotten distracted while they were talking. The priest reveals that he investigated how she could become a member of the parliament, but thinks it's better to find another way to enter the palace. He explains that there were cases of sisters becoming lectorates, but all of them came from the central pantheon, as did the people responsible for placing them there. Alicia says that in that case, that's where she must go, something the priest strongly disagrees with. After all, no one knows what that old man might do to her. Edwin says he's going to pretend he never heard that suggestion. Even so, the girl begs him to let her do it, because she is the only one who knows those wrinkled hands that grabbed her by the hair, forcing her to sit like a saint, then throwing her away once another appeared, and how she was even branded on her back, forced to walk through the palace like an animal, had her tongue cut out with rusty scissors, and after all that was thrown into a fire. Edwin asks if she really intends to enter that place of her own free will. Alicia says that they already have a saint, so it's unlikely she'll be targeted, and if that is the only path, she can't afford to sit around thinking through every option. After all, no matter how much she tries to run away, fate keeps messing with her and hurting the people she loves. So this is her vengeance, her fight to protect those people. She says, "I can't simply sit here afraid. I will go to the Central Pantheon and become a member of the Legislative Council." And that's where we're stopping for today. This story, The Fake Saintess Bears Tainted Robes, is getting better with every chapter. I covered everything up to chapter 28, and wow, there's a lot to unpack. First of all, can we talk about Alicia and Edwin? The man is literally fighting for his life every time she gets close. He swears he's a perfect clergyman, but the way he acts around her says the complete opposite. Their chemistry is so obvious, it's almost funny. He's trying so hard to stay pure, and she's just living her life. What do you guys think about Edwin? Is he actually falling for her? Or is he just confused? And is Alicia brave or completely insane for planning to walk into the Central Pantheon on purpose? Also, what are your thoughts on Victor showing up out of nowhere like that? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the recap, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. This story is only getting crazier from here. Kisses, and see you next time.